The tale begins with a group of men in white uniforms working hard to till the soil. A shout echoes through the air demanding someone to bring water. Next they lay down the straw. Several men stand in a line carrying buckets of water, while another man perched on the edge of a small cliff berates them as slaves, barking orders to speed up their efforts. Nearby, a goblin scribbles notes into a log carried by one of the men. Meanwhile, one man cannot escape the agony of the relentless lashes tearing into his shoulders, nor the mixture of blood and sweat saturating his body. He grumbles about the excruciatingly harsh existence of lifelong servitude. In a completely different context, the strongest man alive had claimed the title of champion at the young age of 27 and maintained his position as the world's top fighter for 2 consecutive years. During a decisive fight, the referee declared the match over when the towel was thrown in. The victor, with an unbroken record of 23 wins and 0 losses, had secured his place as the heavyweight champion of the largest MMA league in the world. He even wrapped up his career with an undefeated title defense before retiring. That man is Choi Hyunseok, a celebrated athlete from the Republic of South Korea, and he is the central figure of this story. Not long after his retirement, fate dealt him an unexpected hand in the form of the infamous truck Kun. As you might guess, the truck collided with him, cutting his life short. Hyunseok found himself bitterly lamenting the loss of all the money he had painstakingly saved for his retirement. After all, fighting was the only thing he had ever known in life. Adding to his woes, he was a single man with no romantic experiences to his name. Even half an hour after his death, Hyunseok remained melodramatic, though his perspective slowly began to shift. He started to see the silver lining. No more grueling training sessions, no more championship matches to defend. He even took solace in his lack of family or close friends, realizing there was no one to grieve his passing. While drifting in this ethereal space, an arm appeared out of nowhere. It belonged to a stunning angel who apologized for her tardiness. She referred to Hyunseok as an SSS-class hero and introduced herself as Rachel. Her role? She was a recruiter tasked with finding individuals whose earthly lives had ended. Hyunseok, overwhelmed and confused, blushed at her appearance, particularly at her chest. He flushed even deeper when Rachel grabbed his hand. Hyunseok requested an explanation, and Rachel presented him with 2 choices. The first option was to embrace death and await reincarnation, likely as an unlucky old bachelor. The second was to be resurrected immediately as a hero destined to save a world desperately in need of him. Rachel made the second choice especially alluring, surrounding Hyunseok with visions of beautiful women. Feeling unprepared and overwhelmed, Hyunseok responded that he needed time to think, as the situation was both sudden and lacking in detail. Rachel gently pressed him, asking if he truly intended to pass up such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She painted a vivid picture of the rewards awaiting him: wealth, fame, gorgeous women, and even exclusive privileges. Yet, as Rachel continued her pitch, Hyunseok had already started tuning her out. He pondered his options. Choosing to become a hero meant fighting once more, a path he had just retired from. The alternative, peacefully awaiting reincarnation, seemed far more appealing. Rachel, noticing his lack of enthusiasm, decided to amplify her efforts. She described how, in the other world, the village chief would run to him barefoot, offering food and hospitality from the very start. Hyunseok would be warmly welcomed and would easily complete any quests given to him. Rachel went on to say that the chief might even offer his daughter, renowned as the most beautiful woman in the village, to Hyunseok. However, Hyunseok's stoic expression remained unchanged, much to Rachel's growing concern for her recruitment bonus. Switching tactics, Rachel feigned defeat, suggesting Hyunseok simply accept his fate as a lonely bachelor. This caught his attention. To seal the deal, Rachel introduced a chilling thought: there was no guarantee that his next life would even be as a human. This realization struck a chord in Hyunseok's mind. As Rachel began to leave, he grabbed her leg, announcing his decision to accept her offer. Feigning indifference, Rachel coyly asked him to repeat himself. Hyunseok tightened his grip, shouting that he would indeed take on the role of a hero. Satisfied, Rachel grinned and suggested they begin immediately. Bewildered, Hyunseok asked what she meant. A glowing magic circle appeared beneath him, signaling the start of his journey. Protesting his lack of preparation, Hyunseok realized there was no stopping what had already begun. Rachel insisted that the breathtaking world awaiting Hyunseok was already prepared for his arrival. She wished him an incredible adventure, though she couldn't help but complain about how difficult he made things, even though he ultimately agreed to go. Suddenly Rachel received a call. She picked up and reported that the prospective hero, Noam 137,421 Hyunseok, had just completed his transmigration. Meanwhile, Hyunseok drifted into unconsciousness, only to awaken to someone telling him to open his eyes. He wondered if this could be the village chief Rachel had mentioned, the one with the most beautiful daughter. The story seemed to be unfolding as expected, until an unexpected punch landed in his stomach, jolting him awake. Irritated, Hyunseok lashed out, asking if the person had a death wish, but he stopped mid-sentence. The figure before him didn't look human, it was wearing a wild boar skull adorned with horns. This strange creature was fuming, accusing Hyunseok of slacking off in the slave dormitory. Hyunseok, thoroughly confused, hesitated. Could this bizarre creature possibly be the village chief Rachel mentioned? The thought seemed absurd, it looked more like a monster he was supposed to fight. Timidly he introduced himself as a hero. The creature looked puzzled and approached him, mocking the idea of heroes being idiots nowadays. Hyunseok began to suspect something had gone terribly wrong but convinced himself that Rachel wouldn't deceive him. Was this monster his first quest? Trying to remain calm, he decided to take action in true Korean fashion. But before he could think further, the creature asked what he had just said. Without hesitation, Hyunseok kicked the creature, yelling for it to die. He briefly celebrated his successful kick, until the creature grabbed his foot. The creature smirked, asking if Hyunseok truly thought himself a hero. With a tired tone, it grumbled about how exhausting these self-proclaimed heroes were and wondered where they kept coming from. Hyunseok found himself immobilized as the creature clenched its fist and taunted him, saying he'd feel better after a good nap. The creature tossed Hyunseok into an underground prison. As Hyunseok adjusted to his dim surroundings, a loud banging sound echoed through the area. Someone outside the door screamed to open it, demanding another round with the cow-headed monster. The door creaked open to reveal an irate goblin wielding a sword. The goblin barked at the noisy prisoner, threatening to boil him into soup if he didn't shut up. Terrified, Hyunseok promised to stay quiet. After the goblin left, Hyunseok started complaining to himself about the so-called beautiful other world. He wondered where everything had gone wrong. His biggest concern? Dying a virgin in this life too. Suddenly, a voice called out to him from a small window in the cell. The person on the other side asked if he was a newcomer. Hyunseok, intrigued, asked who they were. The man introduced himself as a senior hero, about to embark on his own journey. He explained that they were currently trapped in the Demon King's army fortress, where humans were enslaved. Peeking through the window, Hyunseok was shocked to see a fellow Korean. He respectfully addressed the man as his sunbae and asked how they ended up in this dire situation. The man, amused by Hyunseok's politeness, teased him before yelling loudly to the other prisoners, asking if the self-proclaimed heroes were still alive. Voices erupted from every direction, claiming to be heroes. The room was packed with unfortunate souls who had met similarly grim fates in this world. Hyunseok, baffled, asked what was happening. The sunbae casually explained that there were at least 100 heroes who had fallen into the Demon King's fortress. He pointed out that the red cow-headed creature Hyunseok had encountered earlier was Reed Run, the head of the fortress. The goblin who had just threatened Hyunseok was Jark, a notoriously cruel prison guard. The man then revealed the truth behind their predicament. It was all because of Rachel, the so-called angel. Hyunseok's face twisted in confusion as the man cursed Rachel, referring to her as a wicked demon. The sunbae muttered bitterly, lamenting how things could have been different if not for her mistake. Hyunseok, growing hysterical, demanded clarification. Were they not supposed to start their journey in this nightmarish place? The man confirmed his suspicions. He explained that other heroes who had been captured in different locations told him about proper starting points. Heroes typically began their journeys in peaceful cities or rural villages, even without powers. Hyunseok's realization hit hard. The reason he was in this hellish situation was none other than the so-called angel Rachel. He remembered the angel's face clearly. A few days later, we find ourselves observing the 2nd Slave Squad of the 3rd Battalion within the Demon King's army. Humans were forced to work under harsh conditions, with goblins supervising them closely. The humans were even made to chant, "Let's crush the humans, let's devour the humans." Hyunseok's body shook with exhaustion as he carried an enormous log, a goblin perched lazily on top. Eventually, a bell rang, signaling the end of the day's labor. The goblin ordered them to return to their cells. Back in his prison cell, Hyunseok reflected on how the prison conditions almost seemed better in comparison. He recalled the angel's promise about special privileges for heroes. He decided to try a popular command often used in these scenarios: status window. To his surprise, it worked and his status appeared before him. As he examined his stats, he learned some basic information about his strength and abilities. Hyunseok muttered something about what he had discovered, catching the attention of the man in the neighboring cell. The man, overhearing him, was surprised to learn that Hyunseok already had stamina at level 1. Hyunseok confirmed it and mentioned his strength stat was at 28. The man, recalling Hyunseok's reputation as a former champion, was amazed. He hadn't expected Hyunseok to be so exceptional, especially with stats exceeding 30 at level 1. Hyunseok, however, dismissed the praise, pointing out that he was still just a slave. The man remained optimistic, assuring Hyunseok that someone with his potential could definitely escape and become a true hero. Hyunseok, unconvinced, feigned sleep. In reality, he was preoccupied with his low level, doubting it would help him break free. As the night deepened and the man finally fell asleep, Hyunseok quietly got up to check his status window again. He noticed 2 intriguing options: mana that could grant superhuman strength and something called hero points. Hyunseok realized that the other so-called heroes didn't seem to know about hero points, as no one had ever earned any. Suddenly, a familiar light appeared, and the angel re-emerged, flaunting her appearance. With a teasing smile and a playful pout, she greeted him with a cheerful, "Long time no see." She provocatively asked whether she should reveal some important information about hero points. Before she could finish, Hyunseok grabbed the diminutive Rachel in his hands, his expression dark with frustration. He told her bluntly that he didn't care about hero points or anything else she had to say. At that moment, his priority was giving her a piece of his mind. Moments later, Rachel found herself tied up and dangling like bait on a fishing line. Apologetically, she explained that her magic circles had malfunctioned due to an unfortunate accident involving spilled coffee during a snack break. During her explanation, soundproofing magic was activated to ensure privacy. Hyunseok questioned whether she had been punished by being assigned as his manager. Rachel clarified that her role was to be his personal fairy, a guide to assist him until he defeated the Demon King. Hyunseok made it clear that he no longer cared about being a hero. Rachel, puzzled, asked him to elaborate. He explained that he had no intention of defeating the Demon King and would prefer to live a normal life. Rachel admitted that many prospective heroes chose that path, but she emphasized his extraordinary SSS-level potential. Hyunseok argued that his potential didn't obligate him to anything. He confessed that he never felt it was his destiny in the first place. Rachel tried to protest, but Hyunseok interrupted, saying he didn't want to live a life filled with endless battles as he had in his past. Rachel was startled by his words. She had always seen him as a foolish warrior driven only by fighting in women, but now she worried about her own fate. When she received her assignment as a personal fairy, Rachel had vehemently protested. She felt it was unfair for someone of her status to endure such a humiliating role. Nevertheless, she was ordered to stay by Hyunseok's side until he defeated the Demon King, and the decision was final. A personal fairy, she was told, must actively support and share both successes and failures with their assigned warrior. Despite her protest, she was teleported directly to the demon fortress. Back in the present, Hyunseok deduced that a personal fairy was obliged to obey their warrior's commands. Using this to his advantage, he instructed Rachel to contribute to his escape plan. Reluctantly, she agreed. A sudden noise from the door made Hyunseok act quickly, grabbing Rachel to conceal her presence. Goblins were waking the prisoners for the next day's labor. Rachel grumbled that she could use her stealth abilities without his interference. Even after roll call was complete, Hyunseok noticed that Jark, the cruel goblin guard, was still lingering by his door. The Jark informed Hyunseok that Raedran had summoned him to his office. Once there, Raedran brought up an unexpected topic. Apparently, Hyunseok had been working diligently these days. Hyunseok was utterly shocked while the Jark casually lounged on his shoulders. He couldn't believe that the foul-smelling goblin had actually complimented him. Raedran admitted that initially he had thought Hyunseok was just another lunatic human, but seeing his recent efforts had changed his perspective. That was why Raedran proposed a new role for him, head slave. Hyunseok was baffled and had no idea what Raedran was implying. Raedran elaborated, explaining that the workload had significantly slowed down recently, and someone needed to step up to manage the humans. Rachel anxiously hoped Hyunseok would refuse the offer outright. She whispered furiously, pestering him to decline, even yelling that a hero should never submit to officers in the Demon King's army. Both Raedran and the Jark heard the commotion and asked what the noise was. Hyunseok quickly shouted that he'd handle everything and ensure the humans worked harder. To distract them, he exaggeratedly bowed, slamming his head on the desk with a loud thud. Raedran was delighted. He confessed that, contrary to his first impression, he was beginning to like Hyunseok. He even promised to write him a special recommendation letter to join the Demon King's army, if he continued to perform well. Hyunseok was dismissed but felt despair deep down, watching his escape plans crumble. A few days later, the humans were chanting while working. Hyunseok strutted around, smugly scolding one worker for being too slow. He mocked, "Even my grandma could run faster than that." With such an attitude, he looked perfectly suited for the Demon King's army. The system window popped up, revealing that his hidden skill, charisma, had increased. Due to his leadership experience, Hyunseok exclaimed that being the head slave was the best. The other men exchanged worried glances, convinced he had lost his sanity. They whispered about him behind his back. Rachel, however, reprimanded him, warning that this behavior could land them in serious trouble. Hyunseok dismissed her concerns, telling her to trust his plan. He added arrogantly, "A sparrow like you can't understand the strategies of a phoenix like me?" When a man collapsed to his knees, Hyunseok scolded him harshly. The system window notified him that Reed-Run's favorability towards him had increased. Hyunseok saluted dramatically and thanked Reed-Run, declaring his loyalty. Rachel exploded in frustration, reminding Hyunseok of his desire for adventure and escape. Hyunseok scratched his head, explaining sheepishly that he was simply following the system's guidance. He reasoned that obeying the system was part of being a hero. Rachel argued furiously, insisting that boosting the Demon King's army officials' favorability was absurd and completely unlike any hero quest she had ever seen. Hyunseok stood firm, claiming it was the truth, even offering to read the quest description aloud. He read, "You who have found yourself trapped in the Demon King's fortress due to an idiot's mistake?" Rachel cut him off, arguing that the language was far too informal for a system message, which should always use neutral, precise wording. Hyunseok shrugged, insisting that perhaps an SSS-level hero system worked differently. The previous night, Rachel had made a scene, accusing Hyunseok of accepting the head slave position too willingly. Hyunseok retorted that she was the crazy one, not him. Out of nowhere, a system message had appeared, addressed to Hyunseok. It stated, "You who have found yourself trapped in the Demon King's fortress due to an idiot's mistake might feel as frustrated as someone discovering an empty toilet paper roll. However, this is an opportunity. To become a true hero, you must gain the favor of the Demon King's officer, Red-Run, and earn 100 hero points." Hyunseok had been stunned at the time but realized this was his only viable option. Now back at work, Hyunseok led the slaves in singing the Demon King's Third Army Corps song. Rachel was puzzled, realizing only high-ranking figures could alter quest objectives. She wondered why they would do such a thing for Hyunseok. Suddenly, Jark approached Hyunseok again, instructing him to follow him to Reed-Run's office. Red-Run praised Hyunseok for the significant increase in productivity among the slaves. Hyunseok, feigning humility, attributed the improvement to Reed-Run's wise decisions. Rachel scoffed, muttering that such shallow flattery wouldn't work. But to her shock, Red-Run seemed genuinely pleased, visibly flinching with satisfaction. The system window reappeared, announcing that Hyunseok had achieved his favorability goal and successfully completed the hero quest. He earned 100 hero points, unlocking the beginner heroes store with his first points. Both Hyunseok and Rachel were astonished that the plan worked so effectively. With the favorability quest complete and everything progressing smoothly, Hyunseok decided it was time to move on to the next phase of his strategy. He approached Red-Run, asking permission to begin training the slaves. Red-Run raised an eyebrow and questioned the request. Hyunseok painted an idealistic picture, a group of slaves working in perfect harmony, trained to the point of discipline mastery, each performing the labor of three without slacking. He emphasized that with such efficiency, the fortress could be fully constructed within a week. Red-Run, however, argued that humans were physically too weak to endure training while continuing their tasks. Unfazed, Hyunseok added that if this plan succeeded, even the commander would heap praises on Red-Run. This was enough to convince Red-Run, who approved the training without much further thought. Back in his cell, Rachel was dramatically despairing over the situation. She lamented that her hero had completely lost his mind, not only submitting to the Demon King's army but now training slaves on their behalf. She felt utterly hopeless and dejected. Hyunseok, irritated by her theatrics, snapped at her for being so noisy. He assured her he had a plan. Skeptical, Rachel asked if he was trying to make a fool of her again. Hyunseok, quick-witted as always, retorted by asking if she thought he was her He then revealed his true intentions, using the slaves to stage a rebellion. Hyunseok explained that the fortress housed around 3,000 human slaves, while the Demon King's army station there had only about 500 soldiers. Furthermore, a base for the Human Alliance was located nearby. In the chaos of an uprising, they could request reinforcements from the Human Alliance. Hearing this, Rachel's despair transformed into admiration, her eyes sparkling as she admitted he wasn't as foolish as she had thought. Hyunseok then decided to check the rewards from the quest. Rachel, still skeptical, asked if he truly received hero points or if the whole quest was fabricated. Hyunseok reassured her, explaining that everything he had been saying was true. He even shared that the hero's store had been unlocked and decided to take a look. Hoping for something useful, Hyunseok approached the store with high expectations. This, he thought, could be his lifeline and the key to gaining a real hero skill. When the status window revealed the store's offerings, Hyunseok was shocked. The skills included Hold Your Breath, F rank, which improved breath control, and Shit-Holding, a skill to endure bowel pressure longer. Hyunseok sarcastically mused that shit-holding should have been an SSS rank skill, especially useful in public emergencies. The other skills available were mundane, cooking, cleaning, and laundry. Confused and furious, Hyunseok questioned how these were hero-appropriate skills. Rachel, laughing at his frustration, explained that the store was still at level 1. She assured him that collecting more points and leveling it up would eventually unlock better options. Still fuming, Hyunseok lashed out, telling Rachel to shut up and calling her a swindling fairy. The next day, the slaves saluted the Demon King as Hyunseok commanded them to sing the Third Army Corps song. At his signal they began. We, the great Demon King army, defeat humans, eat humans. Forget all the suffering when you catch them. Nothing under the sky compares to the Demon King's affection. Reed Run observed the performance, feeling pleased with his decision to allow Hyunseok to train the slaves. Suddenly, the door to his quarters burst open as Jark entered with urgent news. The human army was advancing toward the fortress. The 8th Division, the largest unit in the area, had already fallen into a trap and retreated. If the 8th Division had been defeated, Jark warned, it was only a matter of time before the humans reached the fortress. Despite the dire situation, Reed Run remained calm. He acknowledged Jark's suggestion to evacuate but insisted they wait a moment. He declared that since ancient times, wars were won or lost based on supply lines. The first rule of war, he stated, was never to lose a competent supply officer. With that, he instructed Jark to leave while he took care of Hyunseok before following. Meanwhile, Hyunseok scolded the slaves, asking if they were prepared to follow his orders. Hearing a commotion, he sighed, suspecting that combat training might once again be interrupted by Reed Run's constant surveillance. Checking the status window, Hyunseok noted that while his abilities had improved slightly, it wasn't enough to launch a rebellion. He muttered aloud, hoping for an unexpected event that could help him increase his power quickly. Before he could finish his thoughts, Reed Run landed abruptly beside him. Reed Run tapped Hyunseok's shoulder and called out to him, catching him off guard. Hyunseok turned, surprised by the sudden presence of Reed Run, who seemed to be in a hurry. We don't have time, Reed Run said urgently. You must come with me right now. Confused, Hyunseok asked why and where they were going, but Reed Run offered no explanation. Just then, the commander of the human army bellowed an order to attack, declaring that victory was within their grasp. Human soldiers armed with spears charged forward, successfully striking several goblins in their path. Their advance, however, was halted by a terrifying sight, the Red Nightmare Reed Run. The commander shouted for the troops to retreat and let the knights handle the enemy. Despite the order, the humans continued their charge, emboldened by their momentum. As Hyunseok watched the chaos, a thought crept into his mind. Why were human troops here? He began considering the possibility of using the situation to his advantage. Perhaps this was his chance to stab the Demon King's commander in the back end. Return to human society as a hero. One of the humans yelled, "Die, Red Nightmare," and lunged at Reed Run. With unsettling ease, Reed Run grabbed the man by the head and crushed it, leaving Hyunseok frozen in shock. Reed Run then unleashed his combat arts, performing the 7th movement. He slammed the soldier's face into the ground, following it up with an area of effect attack, the explosive destruction wave. The ground shattered, sending human soldiers flying through the air. Turning back to Hyunseok, Reed Run asked, "Are you all right?" Hyunseok saluted reflexively, replying that he was fine and subtly adding that he'd be leaving soon. This moment reminded Hyunseok that he was still in the company of one of the Demon King's most formidable warriors. The battlefield buzzed with activity as the humans claimed the area. They raised 2 flags at the center and began organizing the citizens of Mariot Kingdom and Drasan Empire. A soldier questioned Hyunseok's prison mate, asking if they were warriors. The man replied affirmatively. The warriors were separated from the other captives and led down a different path. A figure appeared to greet them, Olivane Grimier, a middle-aged man with striking red hair and a beard. He was a duke of the Dresden Empire and commander of the Allied forces. A soldier approached Olivane, reporting that the evacuation had been completed. Olivane praised the soldier for his efforts. The soldier also mentioned that those claiming to be warriors had been drafted. Olivane gave the order to begin. "All soldiers to your positions," he commanded. Moments later he gave a chilling order, "Annihilate all the warriors before us." Meanwhile, a carriage traversed the forest. Inside, Hyunseok sat in sullen silence, bidding farewell to his dreams of adventure and his imagined second life. Across from him, Reed Run sat stoically. Hyunseok couldn't help but think about how Reed Run had effortlessly dispatched everyone chasing them. Their pursuers were no longer a concern. Rachel, attempting to cheer Hyunseok up, remarked that moments of crisis often present opportunities. She suggested they head to the headquarters and properly assess the Demon King army situation. Hyunseok, unimpressed, told her to shut up. Breaking the silence, Reed Run admitted, "I must have fallen asleep for a moment." He looked at Hyunseok and asked, "Did you say something?" Hyunseok quickly covered, claiming he was just mumbling about how honored he was to accompany someone like Reed Run. Reed Run, seemingly touched, expressed his appreciation. He informed Hyunseok that they were nearing the 3rd Corps headquarters and encouraged him to look forward to it. "Once we arrive," Reed Run added, "I'll officially enlist you in the Demon King's army." Hyunseok turned pale but managed to force out, "It's an honor." Rachel too panicked silently. At the headquarters, a guard announced Reed Run's return, prompting the gates to open. Reed Run gestured for Hyunseok to follow, stating that he would take him directly to the commander. "It's an absolute honor to meet the commander so soon," Reed Run remarked, though his body language hinted otherwise. He warned Hyunseok to be on his best behavior in the commander's presence if he wanted to live. Recalling an old saying about surviving even in a tiger's den by keeping one's wits, Hyunseok steeled himself and vowed not to give up. At the commander's door, Reed Run announced himself and was granted entry. As the door opened, Hyunseok heard a woman's voice, making him wonder if the commander was human. The figure before them was striking, a woman with long ears, claw-like nails, and her eyes obscured. Her jaw and neck bore a different hue, adding to her otherworldly appearance. She lounged in her chair, wearing stilettos, exuding an aura of command. "Welcome back, Reed Run," she said with a smile. She observed that he had gained even more muscle since their last meeting. This woman was Hemis, the commander of the Demon King Army's 3rd Corps. Reed Run responded with a compliment, remarking on how her beauty had become even more radiant. Hyunseok felt his cheeks flush. He couldn't believe that such a stunning woman was a commander. Hemis smiled graciously and thanked Reed Run for his kind words. Meanwhile, Hyunseok was panicking internally, unsure of how to respond. Should he also compliment her beauty? He wrestled with the thought as Reed Run shifted the conversation. Reed Run admitted his shame for failing to defend the fortress. Hemis dismissed his guilt, explaining that the blame lay with the 8th Division commander, not him. She added with a sharp tone, "I should have already made a bag out of his hide." Hyunseok felt his breath hitch. Hemis continued, noting that the 8th Division commander had returned alive, but as a disgrace. The pressure Hyunseok felt in her presence was overwhelming, far surpassing anything he had experienced before. He clenched his fists, doing his best to conceal his trembling. Changing the subject, Hemis turned her attention to the human Reed Run had brought. Reed Run introduced him as Hyunseok, the individual he had reported about earlier. He announced that he had brought Hyunseok to officially enlist him in the Demon King army. Hemis stepped closer, inspecting him. "He's cute," she commented casually. She expressed her anticipation for his performance, especially since he had been chosen by Reed Run. Hyunseok, though flustered, managed to stammer out that he would do his best. Hemis, however, remarked skeptically, "With that body you won't last long in the demon army." She turned to Reed Run, asking if he agreed. Reed Run nodded, adding, "He'll be eaten alive by the others." Reed Run then noted how rare it was for a human to join the demon army and requested permission to train Hyunseok personally. Hemis's response was swift and firm. "Absolutely not," she said. She explained that Reed Run's time shouldn't be wasted on a human. Then something startling happened. Hemis began to transform. Her head morphed into something resembling a flower, but one with teeth and a long tongue. Hyunseok's jaw dropped in disbelief as he watched her shove her arm into her own mouth. Moments later, her face returned to normal, and in her arms she held a black dog-like creature. She informed Hyunseok that he would now be tasked with caring for her pet. The creature, though small, looked ferocious. "This is Bobo," Hemis introduced him warmly. "Isn't he adorable?" Hyunseok on the inside wondered what kind of pets this could possibly be. He couldn't help but think that it looked like it had come straight from the depths of hell. Also in his own language the name Bobo meant stupid, which added an ironic twist to the situation. Reed Run observed the creature and remarked, "I can sense immense power in it even as a baby." Hemis beamed at the acknowledgement, clearly pleased. Hyunseok, however, remained skeptical. Noticing his hesitation, Hemis asked pointedly about his reaction, intimidating him further. "Don't you like it?" she pressed. Hyunseok quickly backtracked, insisting, "It's an honor to care for Bobo." Satisfied with his answer, Hemis handed Bobo over to him. She advised him, "Bobo is growing, so don't forget to feed him. He gets unpleasant when hungry." She also warned that assigning new caretakers for Bobo had become a challenge, since he had been eating them all. Rachel's voice rang out loudly, surprising everyone. She had noticed a new hero quest in the system window and couldn't contain her shock. Hyunseok shushed her immediately, fearing she might wake Bobo. The quest details appeared before him. Survive by earning Bobo's affection and secure a better future. The reward was 200 hero points. Hyunseok was stunned. Was he really tasked with winning over a commander's pet? Just then the door opened and a goblin entered, knocking on the frame. Hyunseok greeted it politely, but internally he couldn't help but feel uneasy. Having a goblin as his companion made him feel like he was being treated as a snack. Curious, he asked about previous caretakers. The goblin informed him bluntly that there were none left. They were all dead. The goblin explained that from now on, it would be their job to prepare meals for Bobo. "Is that all?" Hyunseok asked. "Yes," the goblin replied, but just as it was about to bark another order, a shadow loomed over it. It was Bobo, licking the goblin's head ominously. Terrified, the goblin clung to Hyunseok's leg, pleading desperately. The goblin even offered Hyunseok his food to save itself. Hyunseok's patience snapped. "What are you doing?" he shouted. The goblin ignored him, knowing one of them wouldn't survive. Furious, Hyunseok grabbed the goblin and hurled it toward Bobo. "You're the one who's dying," he declared as Bobo prepared to make his move. Hyunseok handed the snack to Bobo, who seemed delighted. Without hesitation, Bobo devoured it. Hyunseok and Rachel watched as Bobo happily enjoyed his treat. Later, Rachel found herself in a panic, running for her life. Bobo was chasing her. Desperate for help, she shouted at Hyunseok, but he casually replied, "You better not run too long. He'll get hungry again." Hyunseok's eyes caught something. A new item was available, an extra-large bone. This particular bone could attract Kennedy-type monsters and charm them. It was priced at 30 hero points. Acting quickly, Hyunseok called Bobo and showed him the bone. He threw it and Bobo's eyes lit up with excitement before dashing to fetch it. Meanwhile, Rachel, exhausted from all her flying around, grumbled, "You should have found that sooner." Hyunseok, smug, replied, "That's why my brain doesn't miss the small stuff." He thought the quest would be smooth sailing from then on, but he was wrong. Bobo suddenly lunged at him, narrowly missing and tearing only the hem of his shirt. That's when it hit him. The bone wasn't enough. Bobo needed fresh meat. Rachel asked if he was seriously considering taking Bobo outside. Hyunseok mulled it over, feeling the pressure as Bobo began baring his fangs. Frantically, Hyunseok blurted out the first calming word that came to his mind. "Walk." Bobo froze and immediately changed his demeanor. The feral energy vanished, replaced by a happy, tail-wagging excitement. Bobo even hugged Hyunseok, who sighed in relief. Now outside, Hyunseok searched for the kitchen, but he was utterly lost. Bobo, full of energy, was pulling him in all directions, making things harder. Rachel, scanning the area, admitted she couldn't smell any food. She spotted a goblin and suggested asking it for directions. Hyunseok approached the goblin, who looked puzzled to see a human. As Bobo reverted to his wild nature, the goblin froze in terror. Hyunseok tried to reassure the goblin, explaining it was just Bobo's walk time. The goblin, still horrified, asked why a human was walking Bobo. Bobo licked the goblin's face and Hyunseok firmly told him, "You can't eat him." Hyunseok asked where the kitchen was and the goblin, trembling, pointed to the left before sprinting away. Rachel and Hyunseok stared after him, stunned, before bursting into laughter. The goblin's terror was so over the top, it made them question if he really belonged in the demon army. Once the laughter died down, Hyunseok refocused. He was ready to search for meat in the kitchen. Rachel, however, questioned his long-term plans, asking if he intended to care for a dog forever. Hyunseok scoffed, replying that, of course not, he still had dreams to chase. But when he turned back, Bobo was gone. Panic hit him instantly. He turned pale and shouted, "Where the hell is that dog?" Hyunseok felt despair creeping in. Bobo was a walking disaster, and even looking away for a moment was a mistake. Rachel scanned the surroundings and pointed toward a direction. There they spotted Bobo trotting back toward them. Hyunseok exhaled in relief, scolding, "You scared me half to death." Bobo returned happily, but blood dripped from his mouth, and his stomach was visibly full. Suddenly they heard shouting, "Commander Regis is dead." A vow for revenge echoed through the air. Hyunseok froze in horror. Rachel pointed accusingly at Bobo, whispering, "He's the culprit." Goblin soldiers emerged, and Hyunseok and Rachel began running for their lives. Rachel, gasping, asked if they were about to die. Hyunseok snapped, "Shut up and run." They reached a dead end, cornered by goblins shouting accusations. One goblin vowed to tear off Hyunseok's arms like chicken wings. Another lamented that the commander was already digested, wondering how he would have tasted. Yet another suggested ripping both Hyunseok and Bobo apart, dividing the spoils. Hyunseok forced himself to stay calm and shouted back, "How dare you?" Outnumbered, he needed a plan. Thinking quickly, he lifted Bobo and asked the goblins if they knew who the brave one was. Confused, the goblins stared at Bobo, who they had assumed was just a wild beast. When Hyunseok heard their words, his fury rose and he reprimanded the goblins. He declared that this adorable yet lethal creature was none other than Bobo. The goblins hesitated, recalling that Bobo was rumored to be Commander Hemis's pet, but they dismissed it. They assumed it was just another deceitful trick from a human. Still, some goblins began to worry that Hyunseok might actually be telling the truth. Hyunseok questioned how they could fail to recognize Bobo, calling it a disgrace. The goblins stared at him, baffled by his confidence. Hyunseok, maintaining his composure, commanded Bobo to unleash his beast mode. Without hesitation, Bobo obeyed, transforming into a ferocious predator, saliva dripping as if anticipating a meal. Hyunseok addressed the goblins again, reaffirming, "This is Bobo." He then ordered, "Bobo, bite him." Bobo let out a deafening roar and pounced on the nearest goblin. Blood splattered as Bobo's teeth tore into his target. Hyunseok watched the grisly scene unfold, casually remarking, "A dog without a muzzle sure gets messy." When Bobo finished, only the goblin's bones remained. Turning to the others, Hyunseok asked mockingly, "Anyone else doubt who Bobo is?" The goblins frantically apologized, claiming they had no idea it was really Bobo. At that moment, a system notification appeared before Hyunseok. It revealed that his extraordinary charisma had subdued numerous demons, increasing his hidden charisma stat. Hyunseok grinned, pleased with the recognition. Just then, a voice from behind interrupted him. A calm but commanding presence addressed the group, wondering aloud about the commotion. It was Commander Hemis. She surveyed the scene, amused, commenting that the cute newbie was causing quite the stir outside. Hyunseok felt his blood run cold. Standing in her office had been nerve-wracking enough, but now facing her here was even worse. Hemis chuckled, clearly entertained by Hyunseok's audacity in using her name and Bobo to survive. Hyunseok bowed deeply, admitting he had committed a severe offense. Hemis raised an eyebrow, confused, as she had actually intended to compliment him. She admired his resourcefulness and wit, contrasting him with the less clever demons she often dealt with. "You've got guts too," she added with a smirk. Hyunseok stammered out a hesitant thank you, unsure if her words were genuine praise or a veiled threat. Hemis elaborated, sharing how the demon army relied heavily on brute strength, often creating unnecessary chaos. When Hyunseok inquired what kind of trouble she meant, she cryptically replied, "You'll find out soon enough." She shifted the conversation, once again suggesting he consider becoming an executive in the demon army. Hyunseok was stunned, feeling entirely unqualified, but Hemis dismissed his self-doubt. "You can't keep using my name and Bobo forever," she declared. She explained that the army had a decisive duel system where one could claim their opponent's rank. She gave him 1 month to prepare for a battle. If he won, she would extend her protection for another month. If he continued to succeed, he might even rise to the rank of battalion commander and prove useful. Hyunseok hesitantly asked what would happen if he lost. "You'll regret surviving the battle," she replied coldly, implying that failure would lead to a fate worse than death. Left with no other option, Hyunseok accepted. Hemis even chose his opponent on the spot. Rachel, standing nearby, sighed dramatically, predicting she would be saying goodbye to him in a month. Hyunseok glared at her, reminding her that she was the one who had claimed he had SSS rank potential. Rachel shrugged, explaining that potential only indicated possibility, not certainty. "You're a fairy," Hyunseok snapped, "but you can't even be supportive." As he fumed, Hyunseok noticed something unsettling. The doors ahead were streaked with blood. He wondered aloud if it was truly the kitchen. Cautiously he pushed the doors open. Inside, a towering red-skinned ogre-like figure greeted him. "You must be the human our commander mentioned," the monster said, introducing himself as Kulkin, the demon army's chef. Kulkin asked what business Hyunseok had in the kitchen. Hyunseok remained outside the threshold, explaining he was just there to get a snack for Bobo. Kulkin's eyes narrowed as he realized that Bobo's caretaker had changed yet again. However, he refused Hyunseok's request outright, leaving him dumbfounded. Kulkin explained there was no reason for him to help a human. The only order from Commander Hemis was to spare Hyunseok's life. Desperate, Hyunseok asked if there was any way to negotiate, emphasizing that the food was for Bobo. After some thought, Kulkin proposed a solution. If Hyunseok truly wanted meat, he would have to hunt it himself like the goblins did. Hyunseok paled as he glanced at the goblins, who were busy chopping up what looked disturbingly like other goblins. He realized with a sinking feeling that Kulkin's idea of hunting was far more gruesome than he had anticipated. The next thing we knew, Hyunseok found himself standing before a colossal, ferocious wild boar. He had been informed that this creature would be his dinner tonight, if he managed to kill it. As he stood there, Hyunseok couldn't help but reflect on how he had ended up in such a precarious situation. This same boar had already claimed Morgan's life. Although they called it a hunt, the boar seemed to do nothing but charge relentlessly at its opponents. The cooks had sworn to avenge Morgan. Hyunseok, observing the chaos, quipped that it was unclear who would ultimately be having dinner. Rachel, ever the pragmatist, asked what their next move should be and even suggested they run. Hyunseok shook his head, pointing out that escaping from such a massive crowd wasn't an option. Still, he couldn't deny how perilous his position was. Resolving to act, Hyunseok began to move, but Kulkin's voice stopped him. Instinctively, Hyunseok responded, volunteering to go next. But to his surprise, Kulkin informed him that there was no need. The hunt was over. Hyunseok was taken aback. All this time he thought they were mindlessly charging at the boar. How had they brought it down so efficiently? A goblin reported to Kulkin, tallying 12 dead and numerous injured. In Hyunseok's mind, the cost was far too great. Kulkin, however, seemed unfazed, calling the results amazing and declaring a short break before they resumed hunting their next prey. Hyunseok noticed how little Kulkin cared about the casualties. As the cooks busied themselves, Hyunseok confided to Rachel that escaping was no longer an option. Rachel asked if he intended to join the monster hunts with the others. Hyunseok replied with a firm no, explaining he had no reason to. He mulled over his predicament and concluded that the only way to increase his stats was to level up, which meant he needed experience points. Rachel agreed with his logic but asked where he planned to find such experience in their current situation. Shamelessly, Hyunseok inquired if he would still earn experience points if he only landed the killing blow. Rachel confirmed that he would, though she called his plan disgraceful. Her confirmation fueled Hyunseok's determination. He thanked her and told her they should get moving. Hyunseok knew his options were limited. He had to grow stronger within a month, especially if Commander Hemis's threats were genuine. Approaching Kulkin, Hyunseok expressed his desire to participate in the next hunt as a member of the brave demon army. Kulkin stared at him, making Hyunseok nervous. Had he overstepped? But Kulkin grinned, declaring that he liked Hyunseok's audacity. Hyunseok, relieved, offered his thanks while slipping in a few compliments to appease Kulkin further. Much to his surprise, Kulkin assigned Hyunseok the role of leading the next hunt. Kulkin explained that for their group, the leader's position was the most honorable, reserved for exceptional cases. Hyunseok, feigning humility, protested that he couldn't possibly stand before the noble demons, adding that the other cooks might object to him taking charge. Kulkin, unbothered, simply gave him a thumbs up. Their exchange was interrupted by an urgent call for Kulkin. "What's wrong?" the chef asked. A cook reported a monster invasion, describing the sound of the monster's cry as a signal that an urn had arrived. Hyunseok, confused, asked if they were in danger. Culkin dismissed the concern, though he added that urn meat wasn't particularly good. Drawing a knife from his back, Culkin rallied everyone to arm themselves, announcing that they would hunt the urn and add its meat to the dinner menu. Hyunseok saw this as an opportunity. All he had to do was stay close and land the final blow. Rachel handed him something. A system notification appeared, showing a slight boost to his health and strength for 3 minutes. Rachel confidently brushed off his gratitude, but instead of thanking her, Hyunseok bonked her on the head, grumbling about why she hadn't used it on him earlier. Motivated, Hyunseok sprinted to position himself for the last hit. As he ran, he forced himself to focus on his goals. He pictured a noble blonde lady, no less than 5 children with bunny-like features and a peaceful retirement. He wasn't planning to die again as a defeated, loveless loser. With renewed determination, Hyunseok leapt into the fray, punching the urn with all his might. The monster fell, and with its death came a flood of system notifications. Hyunseok was stunned to see his level increase by 4 from a single killing blow. At this rate, he realized he could hit level 20 within a single day. Elated, Hyunseok felt empowered. Finally, he could grow stronger. Moments later, a trembling cook approached the dead urn, raising a butcher's knife. Before the cook could act, Hyunseok casually elbowed him, claiming his arm had slipped. He laughed maniacally, his grin wide and menacing. It was almost as if he had lost his mind when he declared that every last hit in the world was now his to claim. Time passed and more monsters were slain. Rachel, visibly drained, asked if they were finished now. Hyunseok smirked and praised his buff bot companion for her assistance. All the monsters had been dealt with, and it seemed like the cooks had wrapped up their butchering. But upon closer inspection, he realized the cooks were already gorging themselves on the fresh meat. One of them even shouted for a larger serving, leaving Hyunseok utterly baffled. Culkin caught sight of him staring and called out, asking what had captured his attention. Hyunseok questioned whether it was acceptable for the cooks to indulge in the army's food like this. Culkin responded nonchalantly, explaining that it was one of the cook's privileges, especially since monster meat spoils quickly. He added that for common soldiers, having fresh meat was a rare and special opportunity. The chef even admitted that enjoying good food was the main thing keeping him going. A flood of questions raced through Hyunseok's mind, like what kind of privilege this was or how they managed without a labor union. Despite his skepticism, the chef offered him a portion of the meat, saying he had earned it as a warrior. Hyunseok hesitated, staring at the meat and contemplating how much the cooks had risked for it. Eventually he took a bite. The flavor wasn't bad, there was a strong smell that oddly enhanced the taste, but overall the meat was bland and chewy. Hyunseok couldn't help but think that, back in South Korea, this kind of meat wouldn't sell for long. The realization struck him. These cooks were risking their lives for mediocre meat. His thoughts shifted to an idea. What if he created a dish better than this? It dawned on him that he could win their loyalty through their stomachs, earning their favor and becoming the kitchen's god. He opened the Hero Shop interface, much to Rachel's surprise. After spending points on a skill and an item, he revealed his purchases. A cooking skill ranked F, costing 50 points, and a seasoning loaded with MSG for 20 points. Rachel looked at him in disbelief, scolding him for wasting points on salt. Hyunseok dismissed her criticism, explaining that she was underestimating its potential. He demonstrated, sprinkling the seasoning over the meat. The transformation was immediate. The aroma became rich and the meat turned juicy and inviting. Hyunseok felt triumphant, imagining himself as the god of this new culinary world. He presented the enhanced meat to Culkin, who initially declined, saying he was already full. But Hyunseok insisted, claiming he had poured his soul into the dish and could die happy if Culkin tasted it. Reluctantly, Culkin took a bite. The flavor transported him to his childhood. He remembered his mother asking if he wanted meat for dinner, a memory so vivid it brought tears to his eyes. Afterward, Hyunseok left with a bag of meat, a gift from the chef, who reminded him that it would stay fresh for only 2 days. When Hyunseok returned, Bobo charged at him, startling him. Quickly, he handed over the meat, calming Bobo instantly. Hyunseok encouraged Bobo to eat to his heart's content, pulling out every piece of meat from the bag. Bobo devoured it happily, and Hyunseok even promised to bring more tomorrow, earning a boost in Bobo's affinity. This also completed their hero quest, awarding them 200 hero points, exactly as Hyunseok had planned. Rachel noticed his success and pointed out an item on his screen that could enhance his stats. When she asked why he hadn't used it, Hyunseok explained that he avoided it because he didn't know how it worked. blaming at certain idiots who had skipped the tutorial. Rachel, unfazed, reassured him that it wasn't too late. She began explaining how bonus points worked. Strength increases power. Stamina boosts endurance and resilience. Agility improves reflexes and speed. Mana corresponds to magic. When Hyunseok asked about charisma, Rachel explained it was a hidden stat that couldn't be leveled up with bonus points, only through proper training. She advised him to balance the stats equally, but Hyunseok disagreed, believing it would be more effective to focus solely on strength. Rachel was taken aback by his train of thought. She explained that while focusing on strength might work at the beginning, mana becomes crucial as things progress. It's clear that a body enhanced by mana far surpasses one built purely on muscle training. Hyunseok adjusted his points and asked Rachel if the distribution was acceptable. Rachel examined it and admitted it wasn't bad. She then instructed him to visit the shop and purchase a fundamental skill for mana control. Curious, Hyunseok asked what mana control entailed. Rachel explained that it was essentially a skill to help him manage and manipulate his mana efficiently. She estimated the cost at around 100 hero points. Hyunseok began searching for it in the shop, only to find nothing. Rachel was shocked as it was supposed to be a common item. Disappointed, Hyunseok muttered how he'd thought she'd finally be of use. Frustrated, he even accused her of being completely useless. Rachel defended herself, insisting it should have been there. 3 weeks later, Hyunseok reached level 100. But the process had taken longer than he expected. Rachel remarked that the experience points required increased significantly as he leveled up. Hyunseok pondered whether any other heroes were working as tirelessly as he was. Rachel informed him that he had already become a sinecure. Hyunseok found that hard to believe. He berated Rachel, reminding her of the countless times he had nearly died that day. Rachel explained that most people take about 6 months to reach level 100. She added with some sadness that she wanted to get along with him, but Hyunseok retorted that she had brought it upon herself. At that moment, the door opened and a goblin entered, informing Hyunseok that the commander wanted to see him. When Hyunseok arrived at Hemis's office, she greeted him warmly. She remarked that he looked healthier than before and had clearly grown stronger. She noticed that his mana had doubled. Hyunseok explained that he had been working hard to provide the best quality meat for Bobo every day. Hemis, however, commented on how rapidly his strength was increasing. She asked if it had something to do with the hero leveling system. Hyunseok froze, realizing that Hemis knew he was a hero. He wondered how long she had known. Hemis assured him that she had figured it out the first time they met. He asked her how she knew. She explained that she had a connection to someone who was deeply interested in heroes. Hemis then asked why he thought she had summoned him. Hyunseok tried to guess, mentioning his recent battles. She reminded him of their promise and asked if he remembered it. When Hyunseok affirmed that he did, she scolded him for his behavior. Suddenly, Hemis transformed into a monstrous flower-eating creature. She expressed her frustration with how quickly he was leveling and warned him to work harder if he wanted to survive. For her, it was all about entertainment. Hyunseok recalled how crowds are most thrilled not by flashy performances or easy victories but by dramatic, unexpected twists. He realized she had set him up against an opponent he could never hope to beat. Rachel, panicked, yelled, asking what his plan was. Hyunseok told her to stay calm and let him think. He reasoned that his best course of action was to gather as much information as possible about the opponent before the battle. Hyunseok intended to study their strength carefully. Rachel pointed out that they only had the opponent's name, questioning how he planned to identify them. Hyunseok revealed his plan to buy an item from the hero shop called the Combat Power Meter. The device, costing 50 hero points, would measure an individual's strength, stamina, agility, and mana. Hyunseok intended to use it to gauge his opponent's power level and then train against someone with a similar level. Rachel sighed, teasing him for only being clever in critical moments. Hyunseok fired back, saying it was better than always being useless. They tested the combat power meter on Rachel first. Her combat power was 375. She admitted she couldn't tell if that was high or low, so she suggested measuring Hyunseok's. Hyunseok handed her the device, waiting for the results. However, Rachel appeared confused. Hyunseok asked if she had seen anything. Rachel hesitated, then claimed the device must be broken, as she couldn't comprehend why his stats were higher than hers. Hyunseok's strength was revealed to be 1,560. He smugly asked Rachel if she was sure she wasn't the weaker one between the two of them. Rachel, feeling dejected, admitted she had a strength level of 10,000 just a month ago. Hyunseok asked if the combat power meter had worked properly despite her doubts. They checked Bobo's combat strength, and the damn dog had an insane 47,422 strength. Rachel felt utterly humiliated knowing that both she and Hyunseok were weaker than a dog. Hyunseok found the situation amusing, joking that maybe Bobo's breed had received a buff. Stepping outside, he decided to survey the strength levels of other orcs. He noticed that goblins, who looked the weakest, had considerably lower stats compared to the other orcs, most of whom had numbers comparable to his own. Suddenly, someone announced Captain Bulkman's arrival, prompting everyone to salute. As the captain passed by, Hyunseok used the combat power meter and discovered Bulkman's strength was an impressive 14,300. Hyunseok observed that individuals with combat strength over 10,000 typically held commander-level positions. He confirmed with Rachel whether his opponent was truly a platoon leader. Rachel affirmed this, adding that the opponent's name was Kirkin. Rumor had it that Kirkin was an orc with the intelligence of a pig. Hyunseok reasoned that a platoon leader should only have around 3,000 strength, meaning he might have a shot if he leveled up some more. Determined, he searched for Kirkin. When he found him, the combat power meter showed Kirkin's strength at 6,671. Rachel bluntly stated that the situation essentially meant Hyunseok was being sent to die. At that moment, Hyunseok received a hero quest. The system window displayed a notification, stating that his odds of defeating Kirkin were almost zero. However, because persevering through impossible situations was his defining trait, he was being given a chance. He needed to raise his combat strength to 3,000 within a week. The reward? 300 hero points. Hyunseok sarcastically commented on how perfectly timed the quest was, jokingly wondering if the system was spying on him. Despite the grim odds, he accepted the challenge, realizing it was a do-or-die situation. He resolved to outwit both his observer and Hemis to survive. The next morning in the kitchen, Hyunseok made his presence known. Kulkin greeted him and took note of the goggles Hyunseok was wearing, finding them intriguing. He asked where Hyunseok had gotten them. Hyunseok casually replied that he'd seen others wearing them and decided to get a pair himself. Kulkin speculated that it must be a trend among the younger generation before quickly changing the topic. He instructed Hyunseok to get ready for the hunt. Curious, Hyunseok used the combat power meter on Kulkin and discovered his strength was an overwhelming 35,230. This perplexed Hyunseok as it far exceeded the typical strength of a captain. Looking around, he realized that even the other cooks had high combat strengths due to their constant battles with demonic beasts. This gave Hyunseok an idea. If he could spar against someone with a similar strength level to Kirkin, he could prepare himself better for the upcoming fight. Hyunseok requested permission from Kulkin to spar with one of the cooks, explaining that it would help him improve and contribute more effectively. Kulkin initially dismissed the idea, stating that Hyunseok was already strong enough for a human and didn't need to rush things. However, Hyunseok subtly threatened Kulkin, saying he'd eat the high-quality meat for himself if he wasn't allowed to spar. Reluctantly, Kulkin relented and asked Hyunseok to choose his sparring partner. Later, as the cooks prepared for the hunt, they were surprised to learn that Hyunseok was planning to fight Golbachev, a cook with a combat strength of 2,620. Some wondered if this would be Hyunseok's last day alive. The goblins, however, voiced their discontent, as they didn't want to lose Hyunseok, who provided them with delicious meat. Hearing the commotion, Kulkin silenced the goblins and warned Golbachev not to kill Hyunseok during the sparring session. He instructed him to go easy and not overdo it. Golbachev, looking rather dim-witted, agreed. However, Kulkin clearly doubted his sincerity. The spar began. Hyunseok, brimming with determination, charged at Golbachev. Golbachev reminded himself of Kulkin's warning not to kill Hyunseok. When he swung a punch, Hyunseok skillfully dodged, observing that Golbachev's movements were largely instinctual. Capitalizing on this, Hyunseok launched a counterattack. The fight felt oddly familiar to him, reminiscent of battles he had consistently won in the past. In the blink of an eye, the match concluded, with Hyunseok declared the victor. The goblins were in disbelief. Golbachev had been taken down so quickly that some hadn't even registered what had happened. Hyunseok, equally shocked, realized he had defeated Golbachev with a single kick. This unexpected victory sparked a newfound confidence in him, making him believe he might have a shot against Kirkin after all. At the northern edge of the Black Fortress, near the Great Forest, Hyunseok replayed the spar in his mind. The fact that he had knocked out an orc with double his strength using just one kick reinforced his belief that combat strength was merely a number and not an absolute measure. He concluded that with a bit more improvement he could secure an easy win in his upcoming fight. Just then, a goblin approached Kulkin to report a large number of Talas appearing up ahead. Kulkin, visibly annoyed, asked if they were within Tala's territory. Hyunseok, curious, asked what the problem was. He questioned if it was because Tala's meat tasted bad. Culkin clarified that their meat wasn't too unpleasant. In fact, their bone marrow was considered a great delicacy. However, Talas lived in groups and had remarkably strong maternal instincts. If anyone harmed their young, it would lead to serious trouble. Hyunseok assumed the hunt would stop there, but Culkin, craving their flavorful meat, decided to proceed. He commanded everyone to attack, declaring that Tala's meat would be their snack for the day. He ordered them not to let any Talas escape and to slaughter them on the spot. The creatures resembled spiders with skull-like structures on their bodies. Hyunseok slyly shoved a goblin, feigning an accident, and seized the opportunity to land final blows to rack up XP. After some time, the group had amassed a collection of slain Talas. Hyunseok delivered the finishing blow to the last one, leveling up as a result. Rachel praised him for being a pro at stealing final hits. Accepting the compliment, Hyunseok explained that this was precisely why he enjoyed working in the kitchen. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure enveloped the area, catching Hyunseok off guard. As he turned, someone screamed. The Talas queen had arrived. Her fury was palpable as she saw the pile of dead Talas. With a growl, she expressed her rage. Curious about her strength, Hyunseok used his goggles to assess her stats, only to find her power was immeasurable. The horrifying reality was clear. They had just mercilessly killed her children. Hyunseok spun around to ask the chef what to do, only to find him fleeing. The chef shouted for everyone to survive and meet again later. Hyunseok thought bitterly about the chef's irresponsibility when a loud noise drew his attention. Someone barked orders for everyone to scatter. Weak goblins were being torn apart as the enraged Talas queen screamed, her cry so deafening that Hyunseok had to cover his ears to endure it. Rachel alerted him to look behind, and when he turned, he saw hundreds of Talas charging toward him, led by the queen herself. Naturally, Hyunseok bolted as fast as he could, with goblins in the distance screaming for help. He knew that if he paused for even a moment he'd be dead. Eventually he stumbled upon a cave and hesitated, wondering if it was safe. Rachel reassured him it was empty, claiming she had scouted it earlier. Though Hyunseok didn't fully trust her, he figured the cave was safer than the forest, where he was vulnerable on all sides. The cave was surprisingly deep. He asked Rachel if it was a natural formation, but she didn't know. She did note how spacious it was, large enough for even the Talas queen to enter. An idea began to form in Hyunseok's mind as he spotted a gooey substance on the wall. Rachel dismissed the possibility of it being a Talas hideout, citing the chef's claim that no Talas groups were nearby. However, the sticky residue unsettled Hyunseok. Were these spider webs? Then he saw them eggs. Realizing the cave was a Talas nest, he knew it wasn't a safe place after all. Just as he decided to leave, glowing green eyes emerged from the shadows. A fully grown Talas charged at him. Hyunseok sprinted as fast as he could, with Rachel frantically asking if they were heading in the right direction. Hyunseok admitted he had no idea. This was his first time in the cave too. Suddenly he stepped on something, lost his footing and slipped. Panicked, he grabbed the first object he could find and hurled it at the Talas. The creature caught the object in midair, an egg. To Hyunseok's surprise, the Talas stopped attacking, seemingly distracted by the egg. He turned to Rachel for an explanation. Rachel theorized that the Talas might have found the egg appealing due to its round, smooth and moist texture, noting that it resembled a Talas egg. Inspired, Hyunseok grabbed another egg and taunted the Talas, declaring he wouldn't take any more of its nonsense. The Talas panicked, confirming that his strategy was working. Taking a firm stance, Hyunseok hurled the egg. The Talas scrambled to catch it, reacting almost desperately. Rachel observed the Talas's impressive agility and physique, likely enhanced by its monstrous nature. She questioned Hyunseok about his next move. Hyunseok, exasperated, asked what options he had left when there were still over 100 eggs scattered around. Despite the situation, Hyunseok even dared to taunt the Talas when one of the eggs cracked. He mockingly told the Talas that he could probably catch better than it could. Hyunseok ordered Rachel to fetch him another egg, but she informed him that they were down to the last one. Panic set in as Hyunseok turned pale, realizing he had seriously messed up. The Talas let out a furious growl and lunged at them. Hyunseok quickly ordered Rachel to cast a buff spell. The Talas queen was seething with rage, but Hyunseok noticed that she was already drained from chasing after the eggs. He steadied himself and focused, knowing he could seize victory. As the Talas queen charged at him, Hyunseok prepared his ultimate attack, Paradise Reincarnation shot. Instead of retreating, he confronted the monster head-on, delivering a powerful strike that defeated the Talas. Several system notifications popped up, confirming that Hyunseok had leveled up. Rachel rushed over to check on him, asking if he was alright. Hyunseok admitted he wasn't, joking that he felt like he was dying right then and there. He suggested they find a safer spot. To his surprise, Rachel revealed that she could also use healing magic. Hyunseok praised her, remarking that investing in mana points had really paid off. Rachel, however, modestly explained that her magic wasn't very potent and could mostly just stop bleeding. Hyunseok allocated his newly earned stat points and decided to head back. At level 108, his stats now stood at Strength 56 plus 2, Agility 53 plus 2, Stamina 55 plus 2, Mana 53 plus 2 and Charisma 27. He felt a sense of accomplishment with his now balanced stats, even though he wasn't sure how to utilize them all just yet. He considered it an investment for future endeavors. Suddenly a familiar voice echoed in the cave. It was Kulkin, delighted to see Hyunseok alive. Hyunseok asked why Kulkin was there. Kulkin explained that he'd found the cave while fleeing and thought they were lucky to have made it out alive. But Kulkin froze when he realized it was the Tala's nest. He spotted the scattered items on the ground. Hyunseok revealed that they were Tala's eggs, explaining that this was where the Talas laid them. Kulkin's eyes lit up upon hearing this. He excitedly mentioned that Tala's eggs were an extremely rare delicacy, reserved for high-ranking officials. Hyunseok, irritated, yelled at Kulkin to focus since they needed to escape. Kulkin remarked that the Tala's queen was likely already in the cave and admitted that defeating her would require someone of division commander rank or higher. He resigned himself to the idea that the egg would be his final meal. Suddenly voices echoed from the entrance. The surviving goblins had arrived, along with the head chef. Kulkin acknowledged those who barely made it and offered them a taste of the precious egg. Hyunseok silently vowed not to let this be his last meal, especially since he hadn't yet enjoyed his wife's 5-dish spread. Determined, he refused to die in such a pitiful place. Meanwhile, in Hemis's office, someone greeted the commander, commenting on his usual stiff demeanor. She inquired if he had completed his assigned mission. Readrun reported that he had successfully captured the Holy Empire's next saintess as instructed. Impressed, Hemis praised Readrun for infiltrating a fanatical cult in just 3 weeks. She patted his head, causing him to blush. Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Annoyed, Hemis remarked on the interruption. A goblin informed her of an urgent report regarding the cooks sent to gather ingredients. Hemis dismissed it at first, assuming it was a routine issue, but the goblin clarified that the incident was severe. The Tala's queen had appeared, leaving most of the cooks, including Kulkin, dead or missing. Hemis asked about Hyunseok, to which the goblin reported that he was also missing. Hearing this, Readrun's expression darkened. Back in the cave, the goblins were toasting with Tala's eggs, resigned to their fate. Kulkin bid them farewell, but Hyunseok smacked him on the head, yelling at him to snap out of it. Kulkin gave him a bewildered look as if asking, "What the hell?" Hyunseok replied that Kulkin seemed to be under some wicked spell and claimed he used a secret weapon to wake him. With a triumphant grin, Hyunseok pulled out a new item, the Beast Encyclopedia, Demonic Beast Edition. The encyclopedia contained detailed information on nearly all demonic beasts and required 50 hero points to acquire. He searched for information about the Talos, a spider-like demonic beast that lives in colonies and is known for its exceptionally strong legs. To defeat a Talos, one must aim for its weaker spots such as the torso and head. The bodily fluids of the Talos are extremely flammable, and its eggs contain a substance as volatile as a bomb. The caves constructed with the Talos saliva are also highly susceptible to fire, so using flame magic inside them is a dangerous gamble. Hyunseok turned to Kulkin, asking if he could wield fire magic. Kulkin admitted he could, but only for simple attacks like shooting flames. With a resigned sigh, Kulkin advised Hyunseok to abandon his efforts, warning that the Talos carapace was too tough for his flames to penetrate. Hyunseok dismissed his concerns, stating that he had no intention of burning the Talos directly. Gathering the group, he unveiled his plan. He emphasized that they needed to survive so they could continue enjoying delicacies like the Talos eggs. The goblins, however, thought his plan was futile. Hyunseok cleverly tempted them by promising an unlimited feast of premium demonic beast meat as a celebration if they made it out alive. Their eyes sparkled with renewed determination, and Kulkin, drooling at the thought, eagerly asked about the plan. Pleased with their motivation, Hyunseok explained the details, stressing that no matter what, they must not stop running until they reached the exit. With the plan set, they moved out. Soon they encountered a swarm of Talos. Hyunsuk signaled Culkin to prepare his flames. At the right moment, Culkin unleashed fire, causing part of the cave to erupt in an explosion. Rachel observed the chaos and asked Hyunsuk what he had done. He explained that by allowing the fire to spread, the remaining eggs deeper in the cave would act as a distraction. This would keep the Talos occupied long enough for them to escape. Hyunsuk instructed the goblins to stay focused on surviving and to throw an egg as a diversion if needed. With only one egg left in his possession, they had to locate the exit before using it. As they pressed on, Rachel spotted light ahead. Hyunsuk guided the group toward it, urging them to keep running. Relief washed over them as they reached the light, but it was short-lived. Standing in their path was the Talos Queen. Hyunsuk's expression darkened as the massive creature blocked their way. Culkin, equally dismayed, whispered that the Queen had returned, believing their doom was imminent. But Hyunsuk refused to give up. He noticed the Queen wasn't attacking them outright. Sensing an opportunity, he addressed her directly. He instructed Culkin to ignite something, then held up the last egg, threatening to detonate it. If this explodes, Hyunsuk warned, we all die, your offspring included. The Queen hesitated, her gaze fixed on the egg. Hyunsuk intensified his demand, urging her to step aside. The Queen screeched loudly, causing tension to rise. Rachel anxiously asked what they should do next. Hyunsuk, out of ideas, lit the egg and hurled it toward the cave wall. The egg detonated, igniting a fire that spread rapidly. The ground trembled as the cave began to collapse. The goblins, terrified, scrambled to escape. Hyunsuk shouted for everyone to prioritize getting out alive. But as he fled, he suddenly froze, distracted by a system notification. He had leveled up. Rachel, exasperated, yelled at him to move before he was buried in the rubble. Glancing back, Hyunsuk saw the Talos Queen being crushed beneath the falling debris. More notifications flooded his vision. He had leveled up repeatedly. The realization hit him. All the Talos killed in the collapse had counted as his experience points. This was, without a doubt, speed EXP farming at its finest. Hyunsuk stood there, dumbfounded, before deciding to focus on escaping. He called out to Rachel for a buff, which she promptly provided. Emerging from the chaos, they faced one final challenge. The Queen Talos was still in their way. Culkin, desperate to create a diversion, pulled out an egg and shouted, "This is for you, Queen." He offered the Queen an egg in exchange for a way out. Hyunsuk recognized it as an opportunity. Determined to survive, he sprinted with all his might. The Queen spat a green fluid resembling spider silk, and Hyunsuk began to wonder if this was truly the end for him. Suddenly, red hands grabbed hold of a large trunk. A familiar voice asked if he was all right. Hyunsuk realized he was being dragged. To his astonishment, it was Reed Run. Reed Run was visibly pleased to find Hyunsuk alive, just as he had anticipated. He confidently declared he would handle the situation. Reed Run wielded the massive trunk and struck the Talos Queen with a devastating blow. The Queen emitted a deafening screech as Reed Run assumed a combat stance. Hyunsuk couldn't hold back his admiration and exclaimed how incredible Reed Run was. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Later, at the Demon King's Black Castle, they discovered grim news. Out of the 105 goblin packs in the Demon King's army, only 6 had survived. 99 were either dead or missing, including Culkin. In Bobo's room, the enormous beast whimpered and clung to Hyunsuk, straddling him like a child. Hyunsuk consoled the emotional Bobo, teasingly saying he had returned from the dead just to see him. Rachel commented on how fortunate they were to have survived, crediting the cow-headed figure. Meanwhile, Bobo kept licking Hyunsuk's face affectionately. Hyunsuk replied to Rachel, saying they should cherish their moments of peace, as the looming finals could very well get them killed. Rachel asked for clarification. Hyunsuk explained that finals were approaching fast. Rachel observed that Hyunsuk had matured significantly, and she wasn't wrong. Thanks to the collapsed cave, Hyunsuk had gained a staggering 75 levels in one fell swoop. His current level stood at 200, but Rachel remarked that it still felt inadequate. Hyunsuk shared her sentiment, especially when faced with an opponent boasting over 6,000 battle power. Rachel tested him with a question. Would attaining 6,000 battle power make him as strong as an orc? Hyunsuk replied that it wasn't solely about power level. Rachel confirmed his answer, explaining that such strength also relies on magic. She urged him to master magic if he hoped to confront such adversaries. Hyunsuk admitted it wasn't as simple as it sounded. Rachel reminded him of a moment when he had inadvertently used magic in the past. Hyunsuk, puzzled, was unaware of having done so. Rachel confessed that it was far too basic to be called magic. Hyunseok finally understood. The surge of power he had felt back then was indeed magic. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when the door swung open. Both were caught off guard as Reed Run entered. Hyunseok asked why someone like Reed Run would visit such a modest room. Reed Run informed him that he was there to summon him to meet the great commander at Hemis's office. When Hemis saw Reed Run, she inquired about his unusual presence. Reed Run explained that he had a personal matter to discuss. He requested permission to teach Hyunseok the art of battle. Hyunseok was shocked. Hemis asked for the reasoning behind this. Reed Run explained that Ork Harkin, a platoon leader, had been exhibiting extraordinary potential and seemed suited for the position of deputy battalion commander. If things continued this way, Hyunseok was certain to lose. Reed Run expressed his belief in Hyunseok's immense potential and his desire to witness what Hyunseok could achieve in the future. Hyunseok was dumbfounded, certain the commander would reject the proposal. To his surprise, Hemis approved. Reed Run expressed his gratitude and Hemis dismissed them, stating she had work to attend to. Before they left, she noted how much stronger Hyunseok had grown since their last meeting. While she admired his rapid development, it also irritated her as it posed a threat to Kirkin. She resolved to grant Kirkin something to even the odds. Reed Run led Hyunseok to his personal training ground, a vast space that amazed Hyunseok. He reflected on how much respect Hemis had for Reed Run. Reed Run, observing in silence, noticed Hyunseok's body was brimming with mana, yet he couldn't utilize any of it. He realized Hyunseok's rapid growth left little time for mastering the basics. With the battle only 4 days away, there wasn't enough time. Reed Run concluded there was only one solution. He clenched his fist and declared that pain was an integral part of growth. Advising Hyunseok to stay alert, he delivered a punch directly to his face. While crashing onto the ground, Hyunseok couldn't help but question if this guy was completely out of his mind. Here he was supposedly training him, yet he was beating him to a pulp. Hyunseok shouted at Reed Run to focus. Otherwise he'd die if he didn't learn to block with mana. Determined, Hyunseok tried to shield himself from Reed Run's incoming kick by raising his forearm. He quickly leapt backward to create some distance. Gathering his strength, Hyunseok launched a counterkick. Reed Run found it peculiar. Although Hyunseok's physical strength was nothing remarkable, his reaction speed and perceptiveness rivaled those of a seasoned knight. Reed Run recognized that Hyunseok's fighting spirit was extraordinary. It became clear to Reed Run that it wasn't by sheer luck that he couldn't dodge Hyunseok's kick. Hyunseok's combat instincts were refined to an astonishing degree. Deciding to trust Hyunseok's innate sense of battle, Reed Run planned his next move. He reminded Hyunseok of the wager with the commander, emphasizing that without mastering mana, he had no chance of defeating Kirkin. With a cold resolve, he added that it was better to die here than suffer defeat in front of everyone. Then with a powerful punch, Reed Run hurled Hyunseok into the air. Hyunseok realized in that moment that Reed Run wasn't bluffing. Another hit like that might actually kill him. His mind wandered to his unfulfilled dream of getting married and having adorable children. But Reed Run wasn't giving him time to reminisce. He was already pursuing Hyunseok mid-air, leaving Hyunseok with only two choices: die or block the attack. Praying to God, Hyunseok clenched his fist and prepared to retaliate. The next moment, the ground trembled from the impact of someone crashing into it. That someone was Hyunseok. The force of his landing shattered a significant portion of the terrain. Rachel, standing nearby, was visibly alarmed. Reed Run approached Hyunseok's motionless body, observing him carefully. He declared that Hyunseok had just managed to control his own mana for the first time and asked if he had noticed. Raising his hand weakly, Hyunseok gave a thumbs up, joking that God had answered his prayers. His ridiculous expression made Reed Run chuckle. Reed Run reassured him, saying he'd win if he continued progressing like this. He grabbed Hyunseok's arm and instructed him to stay still so he could heal him. But as soon as Reed Run began, Hyunseok let out a groan of pain, clutching his neck. Reed Run had forgotten an important detail. Dark mana was akin to poison for humans. Realizing his mistake, Reed Run apologized profusely, scooping Hyunseok into his arms and urging him to stay alive. In this world, certain powers inherently counter each other. Dark mana counters regular mana. Mana counters divine power, and divine power counters dark mana. Mana was the domain of humans. Dark mana belonged to demons, while divine power was reserved for the devout followers of God. The Church of Tussis, the most influential religious institution, had waged wars to bring all other faiths under its control. Now, as the divine empire of Gatrin, They anointed a chosen individual capable of hearing God's voice and revered her as the saintess. Somewhere within the Demon King's stronghold, rumors swirled about the captured saintess locked in her room. The next saintess of the Divine Empire, Abelson Marriott, was now a prisoner of the demon army. There were murmurs of doubt among the demons. She hadn't prayed in days, casting suspicion on her claim as the saintess. Still, they trusted Reed Run's judgment in capturing her. Abelson, on the other hand, saw no reason to pray. She believed her current circumstances were preferable to her time in the church. Suddenly, the door burst open and Reed Run barged in, carrying Hyunseok in his arms. Abelson immediately chastised him for his rudeness. Ignoring her, Reed Run demanded that she heal the human. Hyunseok's head throbbed, and he began to wonder what Reed Run had done to him. It was almost comical. His last thought was regretting that the last hand he held belonged to a man instead of Rachel. When he opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of a silver-haired beauty. His immediate thought was that he had died again and ended up in some random place. Hyunseok began lamenting loudly, claiming he would never forgive the angel for this. He dramatically declared he'd rather become an archmage by the age of 30 than go through this again. Praying fervently, he cursed Rachel, accusing her of being a demon disguised as an angel, and demanded eternal torment for her. Finally, he muttered one last wish. If the angel insisted on making him a hero again, she should marry him first. Abelson, unimpressed, called him pathetic. Hyunseok's eyes widened in shock. Reed Run, relieved that Hyunseok was conscious, couldn't help but grab his shirt in excitement. Still dazed, Hyunseok was utterly confused. Reed Run pulled him into a tight hug, but Hyunseok immediately protested, accusing him of trying to kill him again. It was at this moment Hyunseok realized he wasn't dead. Turning around, he glanced at Abelson, piecing together the embarrassing things he had just said in front of her. Reed Run, meanwhile, asked the saintess if Hyunseok was fully healed. The saintess responded that Hyunseok was not yet fully recovered, and it should be evident to Reed Run as well that the dark mana still lingered in his body. She admitted she didn't know what might happen to him. Reed Run asked if her divine power couldn't erase the dark mana. Abelson warned that any misstep could result in Hyunseok's death. She suggested waiting, as the dark mana might dissipate over time. Apologizing sincerely, Reed Run promised to make amends by helping Hyunseok grow stronger through training. Despite being nearly suffocated by the hug, Hyunseok managed to remark that Reed Run didn't need to go to such lengths for someone as lowly as him. Reed Run dragged him away, but Hyunseok protested, asking him to wait. Meanwhile, Abelson grew curious about Hyunseok, wondering why a human was being trained by a demon. A few hours later, Hyunseok finally made it back to his room. Bobo, as usual, was there playfully chewing on Hyunseok's head. Hyunseok thanked Bobo. He recalled hearing that Bobo had destroyed his home and eaten the soldier who tried to feed him. Once again, Hyunseok thanked him, acknowledging that if it weren't for Bobo's separation anxiety, he'd still be stuck in training. Hyunseok began venting to Bobo about everything that had happened that day. It was enough to make him cry. And to top it all off, the dark mana was still coursing through him. Looking up, he asked Rachel if he was going to die. Bobo simply kept licking Hyunseok. Hyunseok called for Rachel again, but she didn't respond. Rachel was crying, devastated that her hero had been ruined and corrupted. She told him that he wasn't the same hero anymore. Hyunseok was taken aback. Shouldn't he be the one crying after everything he had just been through? Eventually, Rachel calmed down and confessed that all of the misfortunes were her fault. The dark mana in Hyunseok's body, his near-death experience, it was all on her. With biting sarcasm, she added that it was because she was a demon wearing an angel's face, a deranged maniac destined to suffer eternal torment in hell. Hyunseok froze, recognizing those were the very words he'd said to the saintess upon waking up. Realizing his mistake, he scrambled to console Rachel, even going as far as to claim there was no buff item in the world as amazing as her. Rachel, however, was unmoved and told him to shut up, saying he didn't mean any of it. Now all Hyunseok could do was wait, racking his brain for a way to make amends. 3 days later, Hyunseok felt like he was going crazy. Collapsed on the ground, he cried from the grueling training Reed Run had put him through. Abelson, who was present to heal him, tended to his injuries as usual. Hyunseok praised her beauty as he always did. Abelson, disgusted by his behavior, couldn't believe this so-called hero. Yet she healed him anyway. Hyunseok shyly scratched his head and asked Abelson for a favor before his battle the next day. He wanted her to pray for his survival and if possible to come watch him fight. The request caught Abelson off guard. The day of the battle finally arrived. a match that would decide Hyunseok's fate. The crowd buzzed with speculation. Why would anyone challenge the commander, let alone a mere human? Of course, Hemis and Reed Run were in attendance. Hemis, enjoying the atmosphere, asked Reed Run who he thought would win. Reed Run confidently replied that Hyunseok would emerge victorious. He had worked tirelessly and his talent was extraordinary. Intrigued, Hemis leaned closer and proposed a bet. If Hyunseok won, Reed Run could continue training him. Reed Run found the wager unusual and asked what would happen if Hyunseok lost. With a sly grin, Hemis revealed the catch. Reed Run would have to kill Hyunseok with his own hands. It was the responsibility he would bear for his bold words. An uneasy feeling settled over Reed Run, but he had no choice but to agree. As she looked at Hyunseok, Hemis remarked how exhilarating it had been since she felt this much excitement. The announcer began introducing the fighters. Hyunseok stood ready, his mind clear and his body in peak condition. He wasn't nervous. When his name was announced, he stepped forward with confidence. Hyunseok reflected on how much he'd grown. His stats had improved significantly, he'd gained a new skill and trait. The intense training had paid off. Reed Run's unique combat style, composed of 10 distinct forms, was now a part of Hyunseok's arsenal. Though his proficiency with it was only at 8%, he believed it would suffice. Our boy was determined to win this fight and hoped that after the battle, he could go on a date with the silver-haired saintess. But his thoughts were quickly interrupted when Rachel shouted, demanding to know what he was thinking. On the other side, his opponent was introduced. This beast, named Korkin, was here to punish Hyunseok for his arrogance. Both Hyunseok and Rachel immediately noticed that something was different about Korkin. He didn't look the same as when they had seen him before. Reed Run was also caught off guard as soon as Korkin appeared. Hemis wasted no time in reminding Reed Run that there was no backing out of their bet now. Korkin let out a roar so loud it sent shockwaves through the area. His combat level now stood at 10,573, which Hyunseok confirmed with his goggles. Hyunseok couldn't believe it. Korkin had surpassed 10,000 in just a few days. Rachel too was in disbelief. She suspected that Korkin must have done something underhanded to increase his strength so rapidly. However, Hyunseok clenched his fist and muttered to himself, of course, nothing was going to be easy. As soon as the fight began, Hyunseok charged toward Korkin. Korkin, already anticipating the move, raised his weapon in preparation. Hyunseok knew that if that massive club landed even once, he was done for. Korkin swung his weapon, but Hyunseok managed to avoid it. The swing was large and easy to predict. Hyunseok knew that he just had to stay calm, dodge and wait for the right opening. Hyunseok landed a solid blow, and the announcer remarked that it must have hurt even Korkin. Hyunseok readied himself for another strike, landing it once more. The impact was tremendous, but Korkin didn't even flinch. Hyunseok immediately realized he had messed up when he saw something blurry coming toward him. The object hit the side of his body with a powerful force. He quickly created distance between them, only to notice that his left arm had been broken by that single blow. Korkin, however, seemed unfazed by the damage he had taken earlier. Hyunseok observed that Korkin appeared normal, and his movements were still predictable. In his mind, Hyunseok reminded himself that he had endured worse before. He steeled himself, telling himself not to be afraid and remembering the lessons he had learned. Combat arts involved using mana with martial arts, allowing someone to smash the ground or break a rock with a single punch. Reed Run had explained this to him. He added that combat arts weren't just about raw strength. The crucial point was that combat arts are techniques meant to kill your opponent. Back during their training, Hyunseok had been told he couldn't beat Korkin with his current abilities. The reason? He lacked the intent to kill. Without a clear intention to kill, his attacks were meaningless. As the present moment unfolded, Hyunseok recalled Reed Run's words. Korkin was about to strike again, but this time instead of dodging, Hyunseok surged forward as if he was about to counter. This time his attack was fueled by killing intent. Hyunseok's punch landed and he shouted, "Fucking die." Unlike his previous attacks, this one pierced Korkin's muscular body. This was the first form of Reed Run's combat style, instant obliteration. And as the name suggested, the arena was obliterated in the process. As the dust clouded the arena, Abelson wondered who had won. When the dust finally settled, Korkin's body was revealed, a massive hole torn through his chest. "Welcome to the Donut Club, ugly ass," Hyunseok thought to himself as he raised his fist in victory. It was official, the weak human Choi Hyunseok had won. Despite his victory, Hyunseok's body trembled, and he realized that if he used Reed Run's technique again, it might just kill him. Meanwhile, Rachel was celebrating. She told Hyunseok that he had pierced straight through Kurkin's heart. Hyunseok could hardly believe they had won. But then a dark red aura surrounded Kurkin's body. Something wasn't right. The announcer too couldn't believe his eyes, exclaiming that it was a miracle. But Hyunseok knew this wasn't a miracle. He watched as a red object began to emerge from Kurkin's body. Twisting in pain as something strange happens to his body, it's clear that the blow wasn't fatal enough. Kurkin remains standing, almost miraculously, despite a massive hole where his heart should be. Kurkin has now literally become a walking meat donut and will be known as Mr. Donut. Choi, surprised that Kurkin can still fight even with his heart torn apart, realizes it must be the commander's doing as he stares at Mr. Donut's gaping hole. Meanwhile, the commander watches the fight with a smile, enjoying how events are unfolding. Beside her, Reedrun wonders what she was thinking by sharing her dark mana with Mr. Donut. She also cast a curse that turned him into an undead when he reached a fatal state. The commander, impressed by Choi's quick learning and talents, smiles, though her expression carries a hint of frustration for having expected more from him. Back on the battlefield, Choi wonders if Donut is still alive as he looks at the heartless monster still standing. Rachel clarifies that he isn't, it's actually a curse causing this effect. However, she notes that the curse won't last long. Suddenly, Donut charges at the hero, preparing a strike with a murderous gaze. Choi laughs, joking that this move is already well known and easy to dodge. Famous last words. In the blink of an eye, he is struck. Donut's fist is already at his neck, and apparently the blow wasn't as avoidable as Choi had thought. Mr. Donut, holding the hero's neck in one hand, strikes multiple times with the other, only stopping when Choi, in a desperate response, grabs the monster's arm with both his arms and legs, causing a surge of energy. This prompts Donut to throw him away, sending Choi crashing into a wall. As Choi reflects on the gentle meeting between his body and the wall, he recalls the near-death sensation he experienced, comparing then to now. It seems like all the bones in his body are broken. With no time to dwell on his misery, he notices someone willing him to stand and continue. Choi then realizes Abelson's presence, gesturing encouragement, telling him he can win. The hero hesitates to believe her, but the doubt doesn't last long. He rises, realizing the fight isn't over until it's truly over. His newfound courage stems from one thing: the fear of embarrassing himself in front of a girl. That's how we do to overcome death. Even with all his bones seemingly broken, he channels mana that acts as an armor for his body. A blue aura covers him. Choi then decides to counterattack. As he moves toward Mr. Donut, the system updates displaying 2 consecutive changes. His mana control advances from F to E and then from E to D. Charging a powerful energy-infused attack, the hero shouts an invitation to Abelson for a date. Screaming while smashing a goblin's thinking box seems like the perfect time to ask a girl for a hangout. The attack drives Donut's head into the ground, but it isn't enough to neutralize him, but it was almost. Realizing his attack was highly effective, Choi continues his assault, repeatedly striking Donut's meat coconut. The audience watches in stunned silence, unable to process what's happening in the arena. Meanwhile, in the room where Reedrun and the commander are watching, she asks Reedrun if was he the one who taught the hero all those moves. Reedrun denies it. He also added, emphasizing that he's never seen anything like this in his life. Turning the attention back on the battlefield, now nearing its conclusion, Choi's thoughts are focused on his possible date. Things like 1 night, 2 days, dinner and hotel, clearly more important things to think in a situation like this. However, he knows he must remain cautious while collapses in exhaustion. As a result, the commander tells Reedrun to be careful. Choi is a monster. She reflects that having a hero serve the demon army will be fun, even though Choi's face reminds her of someone she isn't fond of. Sometime later, the hero wakes up startled in his cabin, bandaged, and in the company of Dog and Rachel standing nearby. Before he can ask where he is, Rachel informs him he's obviously in his cabin. Choi, concerned about the outcome of the fight and his experience, is quickly reassured that he won and that Abelson tended to his injuries. Eager to check the system, he looks at his stats. Hero candidate Choi, now level 212, has seen significant increases not only in his level but also in stamina, mana, charisma, and unlocked mana control skill. As he reviews his stats, Rachel mentions she could have healed him too. Choi ignores the comment, focusing solely on the absurd number of levels he gained. Noticing the mana control skill, Rachel reacts with exaggerated surprise. She defends her reaction, explaining that she's right, it's extremely rare for anyone to achieve mana control. As she tries to elaborate on how amazing this feat is, she's interrupted by Choi, who notices a strangely folded piece of paper. The scene shifts to Abelson's prison. She's gazing at the stars and muttering to herself that it was unnecessary. In her thoughts, the hero is strange. He discovered mana and learned about combat in just 3 days, which isn't normal. This hero certainly has unknown potential. Unfortunately, his personality is inversely proportional to his abilities. Abelson wonders if her prayers were answered or if Choi is simply pure talent. In the end, it doesn't matter. To her, he's the hope she needs. She then knocks on a door, seeking a favor, and Reedrun at the other side answers, offering his help. When Reedrun asks what she needs, she says she wants to take a walk. Back in Choi's room, as he reads the letter, he's surprised to find it's a positive response to his date request with Abelson. She now wants to see him at the courtyard. The hero will finally have the time of his life. Moments later, the time for the meeting finally arrives. Choi, anxious, still doesn't know how to act in this situation. He wonders if he should ask for her number, but there aren't even cell phones in this world. Rachel advises him to forget about this situation and return to his room, complaining that he always ignores her words. But she can't finish her sentence as she's suddenly grabbed fiercely by Choi, who plans to throw her aside. However, just as he prepares to do so, Abelson appears in front of him, accompanied by 2 others. Choi, clearly caught off guard, announces Abelson's arrival, questioning who the other 2 are. Abelson replies that they are her escorts. After all, she couldn't wander alone in her current condition. Choi, with sadness, quickly remembers that she's confined as a hostage of the Demon King's army. Breaking the tension, Abelson expresses her desire to start with a walk. Choi agrees, and as they walk, he thinks about how stressful it is to be under the watchful eyes of Abelson's escorts. They're eliminating any chance of intimacy between the 2, leaving him unsure of how to start a conversation. Abelson, on the other hand, knows exactly what to say. Without hesitation, she fires her question. "Are you a hero, Mr. Choi Hyunseok?" The hero, surprised, doesn't understand how she knows or suspects this detail about him. Abelson explains that only heroes and demons have black hair in this world. Shaken by this revelation, Choi is also asked if he has any questions of his own. She encourages him to feel free to ask. Nervous but grateful, Choi timidly starts his first question. But before he can say anything coherent, they are interrupted by Reedrun. Choi is startled as he watches Reedrun approach in a hurry, frustration evident in his eyes. Reedrun delivers the message that the commander wishes to see him, exclaiming that the hero must follow. Choi panics. His meeting with Abelson ends before it even begins. Abelson also shows frustration with the situation, but it's clear their reasons differ. Observing everything, Abelson begins to wonder if Choi is truly someone trustworthy. The scene shifts to Hemi's chamber, where she explains she's been observing Choi's battle. She comments on his ability to consistently escape death with tenacity and then asks if he remembers what was offered to him. Choi cautiously confirms that he remembers she promised to protect him if he participated in a battle with an opponent of her choosing. She asks him to recall more details of the agreement. The hero recounts that he would become an executive under the commander. Hemis admits that this last part wasn't entirely intentional. She didn't think Choi would last long in his adventures. However, as events unfolded, the commander's perspective changed. Turning to Reedrun, Hemis reminds him that she mentioned Choi was a talent, a good candidate for a leadership role in the Demon King's army. She concludes that Choi is too talented to remain a mere platoon leader. Referencing significant losses among the Cook's company, the commander highlights the shortage of meat supplies, fearing they might have to resort to cannibalism. Choi, confused, understands the statement but not why he needs to hear it. Hemis then declares that he will lead the Cook's squad. Choi is now free to take any initiative needed to restore order to the kitchen. Hemis ends by asking if he will be able to accomplish this task. Hesitant, Choi responds that he will do his best. The scene changes again. Now alone with Rachel, Choi is sarcastically asked how it feels to be a Demon King squad leader despite being a hero on paper. Choi, matching her tone, declares he's so happy he could die. As he heads to his new workplace, the hero tells Rachel he notices her lingering bitterness. Rachel just grunts. Adopting a new attitude, Choi arrives at his destination and begins his duties by confronting a suspicious creature in the kitchen. The creature, one of the servants, mocks him by referring to Choi as a slave. Determined to assert his new position, Choi shouts at the servant as he approaches him. The servant looks confused and suddenly Choi strikes him with a blow to the chin, knocking him out while declaring himself the new commander. Choi then shouts for everyone to gather in the kitchen. Surveying the crowd, The hero notes the strongest one has a power level of 3,500. Still, the group is too small, prompting him to wonder where the others are. Initially numbering 300, now there are only 20. Choi realizes the gravity of the situation, knowing the difficulty of his task and the consequences of failure. Addressing his squad, he asks who knows him. Gradually, some start naming him, the barbecue master, while another dares to call him a delicious human. In a flash, that individual is kicked, becoming a wall decoration. Choi then solemnly reinforces that he is the commander. Next, he orders everyone to address him as the rightful commander of the cook squad. Choi asks why the number of cooks has dwindled. One responds that the others went hunting without permission and were killed by demon beasts. Understanding the situation, Choi asks who the best cook currently is. Someone names Galtram, who is immediately promoted to vice commander without objections. With everyone dismissed, the hero wonders how he'll gather 200 people for the squad. However, he quickly comes up with an idea. The next day, the fairy, the dog, and the hero set out to recruit cooks with a plan in mind. Searching high and low, Choi reflects on how some are easily replaceable while others are irreplaceable. Then he finds someone. With a kick as his greeting, Choi invites the individual to become a chef. The individual, irritated by the treatment, attempts a counterattack but is swiftly knocked down again by the hero, who begins persuading him with arguments. Informing him that he'll be the first of the day, Choi promises him a high-ranking position if he accepts. As a senior, he won't be bothered by many, on the contrary, he'll do the bothering. The future senior begins to waver, especially after learning that his first mission will be to recruit 5 juniors. Thus, it becomes clear what Plan A is, a pyramid scheme. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone is feasting on a large and succulent steak. His name is Doris, and he is a commander of the 3rd Battalion in the Demon King's army. As he eats, he mentions that the place is more peaceful than usual and that this elegant meal is proof of that peace. Suddenly, a goblin bursts through the door to alert Doris that they have a problem. Doris, wiping his mouth calmly, asks what it is and whether the goblin could be more elegant next time. The goblin, still catching his breath, reports that most of the battalion members have left. Doris questions whether they abandoned their posts since they have no other duty but to serve him. Terrified, the goblin clarifies that this is not the case. They have been summoned to join the army's cooking division. Still chewing on his steak, Doris mentions that the new head of the kitchen is a human whom Commander Hemis loves. He then advises them to be more careful next time. The goblin shouts, saying that this is not a situation he should let slide so easily. He adds that they have already taken 200 of his soldiers to serve as cooks. This leaves Doris stunned, as he cannot believe that his entire battalion abandoned him so quickly. Now outside, the soldiers summoned by Choi Hyunseok are gathering. Rachel tells Choi that more than 200 people have already assembled. Choi, resting his hand on his chin, smugly declares that this is thanks to his intelligence. He then adds that they have enough culinary soldiers and that he will finish recruiting soon, but a sudden noise catches his attention, prompting him to look. The noise was caused by the goblin, who was perched on Doris's shoulder, pointing at the soldiers who had left the battalion. Choi's first thought is that this is not a good omen. Adjusting his glasses, he comments that he has no idea what's going on or who these people are, but they seem to be angry about something. After putting on his glasses, the device itself issues a warning, stating that it cannot measure power levels exceeding 50,000. This surprises Choi. The glasses also warn that if used beyond their designated limit, they might malfunction. Choi mutters that he should end this quickly and run away before getting into more trouble. Doris shouts, asking whether Choi Hyunseok, the human who takes care of Bobo, is present. As Choi turns to flee without leaving a trace, Bobo suddenly appears and barks affectionately at Doris, leaving Choi with no escape. Choi halts his retreat, gathers his courage and introduces himself to the commander, asking what brings him there. Doris introduces himself as the commander of the separated 3rd Battalion. Then, slightly irritated, Doris demands to know who the hell Choi thinks he is to question what a commander is doing there. He points at the former battalion members and asks Choi whether he truly believes there is no reason for him to be there. This catches Choi off guard and makes him nervous, as even he had not realized that those scoundrels had brought along all their fellow unit members. Doris then invites Choi to have a conversation in his office. With no other options, Choi agrees. He has a sinking feeling that things have been going too smoothly to be true. Now in Doris's office, the commander asks whether this was really not intentional. Choi insists that he would never do such a thing. He explains that he simply selected the bravest soldiers, and it just so happened that they were all from the 3rd Battalion. Doris is surprised and thinks that the army's commander must favor this human. Deciding it is best to end the matter peacefully, he lets it go. After that, Doris changes his expression to a more amicable one and states that since things have unfolded this way, there is nothing more to be done. Choi should simply take the soldiers he selected and use them as he pleases. Hearing this excites Hyunseok, who asks if it is really true, thinking that he has a good feeling about this. However, just after this moment of euphoria, Doris mentions that there is a condition. Choi immediately starts feeling uneasy again. As a true gentleman, Doris explains that since Choi has already taken 200 of his soldiers, there is one specific soldier he should also take. Choi becomes alert, thinking that even after taking so many soldiers, Doris still wants him to take one more. That must mean this soldier is a useless failure who will only cause trouble. Annoyed, Doris asks whether Choi is refusing and whether there is a problem, even after taking all of his 3rd Battalion soldiers. Feeling the pressure and his legs beginning to weaken, Choi insists that it is not what Doris thinks. He says he is simply overwhelmed with happiness and does not know how to properly express his gratitude. As the door opens, Doris declares that he has made his decision and will now introduce Choi to his new soldier. Then a massive hand appears, and Doris announces that the name of the new soldier is Yuzaru, adding that he is a lovable hybrid born from an ogre and an orc. Yuzaru introduces himself, speaking in the 3rd person. Yuzaru has arrived, Commander. Since Choi was still using his glasses, he realizes that Yuzaru's combat power also cannot be measured. While Choi remains paralyzed at the thought of having someone so strong as a soldier, Doris comments that Yuzaru's flaw is that he is incredibly stupid, but he is strong. He then tells Choi to make good use of him. As Yuzaru tries to enter the room, he bumps his head on the doorframe and loudly states it, making Choi wonder just how stupid he really is. Back at the recruitment site, Choi announces that he will reintroduce himself to all members. He states that his name is Choi Hyunseok, the tamer of Bobo and the new head chef of the army. One of the soldiers comments that this is the first time he has seen Bobo. Choi, holding a bone, remarks that Bobo is a good boy. Bobo's eyes light up, and he even drools at the sight of the bone. Then, turning to the members, Choi declares that from now on, he will be organizing the unit. He puts up a list for everyone to see and explains that it is a new list, prepared by him, in which everyone must check their names and organize themselves accordingly. Rachel, surprised that he actually prepared a list, asks what criteria he used. Choi tells her that he believes everyone has the same level of intelligence, so he organized them based on combat power. He further explains that he assigned the weaker soldiers with more kitchen experience to kitchen duties. Then he asks Rachel if that was not a genius idea. After a while, one of the soldiers calls for him, stating that everything is ready and everyone has been organized. Delighted, Choi says he will check. With everyone divided into 2 large groups, Choi announces that the squad on the right is the culinary unit, while the one on the left is the combat unit. Using his experience, he acknowledges that some people might be unhappy with their assigned roles and invites anyone dissatisfied to step forward. A soldier raises his green hand, confirming that there is a problem. The goblin with a parted hairstyle, one of the weakest in the battalion, is the one who raised his hand. He states that he also wants to hunt and eat fresh meat right away. Choi gives a strained smile, admitting that this is a headache. He then calls for the goblin to come closer. The goblin cautiously approaches, contemplating what might happen. Once he is close enough, Choi suddenly kicks the poor goblin in the balls, making him scream in pain, his eyes bulging. Then Choi announces that this was his entrance exam. The poor goblin, now realizing that he will never be able to have children again, is left in agony. Without remorse, Choi declares that since he failed to withstand the kick, he has failed the test. Only then does the hero system finally appear, displaying a notification that thanks to his excellent leadership and command skills, Choi successfully organized and stabilized the unit. The system grants him the hidden skill of charisma level up, as well as an upgrade to his leadership skill level. Looking at the squad members, Choi asks if there are any other candidates with complaints. After a moment of silence, Choi clenches his fist, preparing to give a speech. Then he shouts for everyone to hear that everything is confirmed. He gives the order for the combat unit to grab their weapons because it is time to hunt. Now, in the great forest north of the Black Fortress, Choi gathers with all the members of the combat unit. Choi remarks to Rachel that, especially today, the forest seems calmer, with no sign of a single beast around. She replies that it might be due to the presence of Bobo and Yuzaru. Since they are so strong, they could be scaring the monsters away. Agreeing with her, Choi acknowledges that it is a plausible theory. Then we see Bobo and Yuzaru looking cuter than ever before. Choi grumbles, saying that those two are his best soldiers, and he simply cannot leave them behind. Rachel then suggests that they use bait to lure the monsters. Choi questions her idea, saying that if they had extra meat to use as bait, he wouldn't need to go hunting in the first place. Rachel smiles and tells him that he misunderstood. She is not talking about sophisticated bait. Pointing at all the squad members, she explains that they will serve as biological bait to attract all the demonic beasts. Choi loses his sparkle, then looks up and asks God what he did in his past life to deserve this. Then he crosses his arms and, with conviction, Choi orders the numbers 14, 3, 1, 43, and 7 from the list to step forward. Rachel, not understanding the significance of those numbers, asks him about it. He responds by saying that those were the numbers he bet on in the lottery back on Earth, lamenting that he could have been the winner. Still tearful, Choi gives the command that the operation will begin now. He then orders Yuzaru to grab member number 14, which excites the giant. After being held by Yuzaru, the poor member number 14 asks if he has lost his mind. Calling him an intercontinental ballistic goblin, Yuzaru effortlessly tosses the goblin far away. Choi, with his hand on his chin like a thinker, comments that it's a great idea, as continuing to throw weak soldiers like bait will eventually attract the attention of the monsters. He then turns to a fox soldier and orders him to light a small fire so the ones thrown as bait will have a way to return. But Rachel questions whether throwing soldiers like that wouldn't just kill them from the impact of the fall. Choi retorts, saying that he is sure 1 in every 6 will come back alive. He tells Yuzaru to keep throwing the others from the list. The rest of the battalion is in shock and whispers among themselves that the human head chef has lost his mind and that they want a long life. One of the goblin soldiers, terrified by the situation, decides to turn around and run away at that moment. As he turns to flee, he sees Bobo with his eyes sparkling with cuteness. The frightened goblin says that this is not what Bobo is thinking and that he will serve the Demon King's army for the rest of his life. But it seems Bobo doesn't believe him, as Choi mentions that the ones he threw earlier are late and should have returned by now. Meanwhile, in the background, the poor goblin is crying for help. At the same time, one of the goblins who had been thrown is running back, desperate and calling for help while being chased by several monsters. Choi smiles, saying it was about time for him to return and let the soldiers handle things now, but only if he needs to land the final blow on the monster to count for XP. But before he can finish his thought, Yuzaru takes off running ahead. He is simply too strong to leave the last hit for anyone else. As Yuzaru takes down the monsters one by one, he shouts that he loves fighting, leaving nothing for Choi. Frozen and speechless, Rachel looks at Choi and asks what last hit he's talking about, since there's no monster left alive. After everything, while Yuzaru celebrates his success with Bobo, Choi is left crying because he didn't get any XP, and worse, he can't even use the monsters as food since they were all torn apart. Rachel, shocked, points out that both Yuzaru and Bobo only need 1 hit to defeat the monsters. Still in disbelief, Choi says he needs to go back tomorrow but without those two. Rachel asks if he is sure about that, since there's only 1 more day before the main commander's duties return to normal. Back at the battalion, Choi orders a retreat, telling everyone to gather tomorrow at the same place, earlier than usual. Back in the kitchen, Rachel asks why he went there right after returning, and Choi responds that he needs to see if the mashed meat works in any way. Kicking the door open, Choi yells asking where the lazy ones are, ordering them to gather. One of the kitchen soldiers runs towards him and asks if something happened. Choi asks if he tried the meat from today's hunt. This soldier is Galum, the vice chef. Galum confirms that he did, but the results were not as good as expected. Choi is uncertain and says that the craftsman isn't very demanding and asks if Galum understands. Galum, in tears, says that he does. Mockingly, Choi asks if, despite all of his experience as a vice chef, Galum still doesn't know how to make minced meat. Galum responds that the main role of the kitchen army is to bring the ingredients, and he is not a personal chef for the commanders. He explains that the commanders care about taste, while the others just want to eat and don't care about flavor. Choi tells him that the members are also struggling and orders Galum to be quicker. Galum quickly runs off, telling the others to gather to light the firewood. Reflecting on what Galum had just said, Choi realizes that everyone with a rank below that of commander survives on tasteless meals, so he has a good idea and smiles as things may be easier than he thought. After a while, he decides to pay a visit to an old acquaintance. He knocks on Abelson's door and introduces himself as Hyunseok. She hears him and tells the hero to come in. Feeling awkward and blushing, he says that it's nothing special, he just wanted to see her. Rachel then says that now she understands the real reason he went to the kitchen. It was to see this woman. He then pulls out the beautiful and delicious dish and asks if she has already had dinner. Choi continues speaking, saying that he only won the duel because of her support and that the meal is a symbol of his gratitude. Abelson thanks him and mentions that she will only want a little bit. The woman then cuts a small cube of the meat and brings the fork to her mouth, thinking that the smell is very good. She takes a bite and after chewing for a moment she's left without reaction. Then, like in Shokyuji no Soma, she says that it's delicious, much better than what she had eaten at the castle. An incredibly tasty flavor. After a few minutes, Choi, pleased, says that it looks like she liked the food since she finished the entire plate. Still shy, he takes the plate and says that now that she's eaten he can leave. Just as he's about to leave, she calls him by his name. Then Abelson asks what Choi's plans are when he leaves this place in the future. Choi, like a good man moved by emotion, quickly responds that it's marriage with her. Hearing this, Abelson's eyes widen. Realizing his intentions and that he didn't understand the meaning of the question, she says that now he can leave. But before he goes, he tells her that there's something else he wants to do besides marry her. This catches her attention. However, before finishing, he asks her what her plans are and what she wants to do when she leaves there. With a lifeless look, she says that she doesn't know yet because if she ever leaves there, she doesn't want to do anything. Now, in Gartran, the divine empire of the capital of Gratium, where the theocracy is governed by the Pope of the Church of Ducis. A man kneels and refers to another as Your Holiness, then he provides the information that they have discovered the location of Abelson Marriott, the next saint. He then adds that, supposedly, Abelson is imprisoned in the Black Fortress where the glutton resides. The man sitting on the throne asks how the next saint ended up in such a place. Tapping his fingers anxiously on the throne, he asks if there has been no word from the Demon King about this. The man replies that there hasn't been, as no one knows what they want since they're not demanding anything. Rising from the throne, the Pope says that in the history of wars between humans and demons, there have been only a few times when humans managed to breach the Black Fortress. Even so, on those occasions when they succeeded, the glutton Hemis was absent. So, attacking directly now would be very reckless. Opening the curtain to the window, he says that he will send a secret rescue team. Then, Pope Orvan IV gives the order for the man to summon their hero. Back in the hunting grounds, Choi organizes the kitchen battalion soldiers into 2 blocks, literally. However, something keeps nagging at him. He can't stop thinking about what the hell Abelson meant when she said that she didn't want to do anything else. Walking to a suitable spot, he stops and says that this should be enough. While rummaging through his backpack, he calls the platoon commander forward and tells him to step up. He takes something from his backpack and tells the platoon commander to eat. What he pulled out were 2 steaks of meat, and while the soldiers look on in disbelief, they think it's some new type of bribe or some kind of leftovers. Choi asks if they're not going to eat, and the soldiers apologize and quickly begin eating. After tasting the meal, the soldiers who ate it shine their eyes and enter a state of ecstasy due to the delicious flavor of the meat. The 3 platoon leaders kneel and say that from now on they will be loyal to Choi, begging for another piece of the meat. However, he pulls out more pieces of meat and says that the chance to taste it is over, meaning that from now on, Choi shouts at them to run, because only the platoon that captures the most living demon beasts will be allowed to eat with him. The 3 platoon leaders run desperately, urging their soldiers to do the same. Seeing this, Choi says that the plan was a success since they're all slaves to their appetite. The plan to bring the monsters alive was precisely so he could land the last hit and level up. Looking at the system screen and seeing his level, status and charisma increasing, Choi says that while he was cutting the monsters, he quickly leveled up 10 times. One of the platoon leaders then asks who the winner was among the 3. Choi turns to them and announces that the winner was the Wolfken platoon and that the Wolfken platoon will have an amazing meal with him. The members of the other platoons ask what they will receive, and Choi answers with boredom that they will have the leftovers. Choi also shouts at them, giving the order to gather all the slaughtered meat and take it to the kitchen. Meanwhile, beyond the Black Forest, we see several lifeless bodies of soldiers and a man in a black cloak holding a sword. Back at the headquarters, someone stands in front of a door and says that they've finally arrived. Inside, Abelson says that she shouldn't have said that to Choi. After all, she can't keep hiding this forever. The door opens and it's the man in the black hood calling Abelson by her full name. He then removes his hood and we see that it's not Choi but a blonde man with green eyes. He says that he's there to rescue her. Recognizing him, Abelson calls him Sir Guffin and asks if the Pope sent him. He replies that he thinks so but isn't sure. Leaning against a table, she apologizes and says that she can't go back now, politely asking him to leave. Surprising her, he says that he'd love to retreat as well, but a mission is a mission and must be completed. With a serious expression, she says that as he should know, the glutton Hemis lives in that fortress, and if he tries to take her, he knows what the worst outcome could be. He approaches her, smiling, and asks how she plans to do that, and Abelson says that she will use her holy power to summon Hemis there. The man then grabs Abelson by the neck and says that he's not there for games, because he's not a prince but a soldier. With a cold expression, he orders her to close her eyes, and when she wakes up, she'll already be in the capital. With his grip tightening around her neck and her almost fainting, Abelson realizes that he may use holy power and wonders how that's possible. As her eyes slowly close, she thinks that she can't go back there again. Then a sleep spell is launched toward the blonde man. It's Choi telling him to take his hands off Abelson. The punch hits his face, but it seems to have little effect. With a small trickle of blood on his face, the blonde man says that it was a punch infused with magical energy and asks what Choi is. He adds that Choi's movements are very impressive for the magic he possesses. Irritated, Choi throws another punch and asks what the hell the blonde is talking about, ordering him to get away from Abelson immediately. The man retaliated with a kick and said it wasn't part of the mission, but it's always good to have something useful, so Choi would go with him as well. The kick was so strong to Choi's stomach that he couldn't stay on his feet. While Choi and Abelson were on the ground, the blonde man said that trivial worms always irritated him. Watching all of this from afar, Rachel saw that the man had defeated the other man with a single blow, so she was unsure whether she should call Bobo for help. Then Rachel felt a frightening presence approaching the area. Inside the room, the man looked at a teleportation scroll and said that there was nothing he could do, but to bring another person with him, he needed to alter a few terms. Then someone arrived behind this man. The person asked the blonde if something wasn't going well. Was Hemis? Smiling, she asked if the man needed help. The man quickly turned around and was shocked to see Hemis in front of him. He wondered how this was possible since he had blocked the saint's powers. Hemis asked if the man could start calling her gourmet from now on. The blonde, trembling with fear, thought that he couldn't feel any magical energy coming from Hemis, and maybe this was due to the difference in their levels. Placing the contract in his mouth, the man thought that maybe the story about Hemis, the glutton devouring thousands of soldiers in a single day, could be true. Hemis emanated her power with a pink aura and said that now she would see how skilled her blonde guest was. The pressure from her magical energy was so immense that the blonde man became paralyzed. He could only think about not panicking because only then could he dodge her attacks, and when the opportunity arose, he would take the saint quickly. Then the blonde man felt a strange dizziness and realized it was due to the punch he had received from Choi, and the dizziness effect came late. While he was distracted, Hemis launched an attack that apparently struck and ripped off the blonde man's arm. The glutton said she liked him and asked if he could entertain her a little more. The blonde man thought that, with the state of his body, it was better for him to leave on his own. Then the blonde man declared the mission a failure, activated the teleportation power, a golden explosion occurred, and he disappeared from there. Hemis was surprised that the man fled even after she had asked him for a favor. Then, with a devilish expression, she said that it was fine because the truly fun things were about to begin now. Then a brief description of Hemis is shown. The glutton is an ancient monster and an ageless witch. All of these were insults to Hemis, the commander of the Third Corps of the Demon King's army. Through the endless flow of time, countless demons were born and appeared. However, the Demon King and Hemis, these two remained unshaken like enormous mountains. Yet, the infinite passage of time has numbed many things, and this is too cruel for any sentient being to bear. A few days later, Choi is training and is struck in the same spot with an attack. Lying on the ground and crying, he was training with Readrun, who tells Choi that his attacks and how he uses magic are still too direct. Readrun says that he doesn't need to be so rigid about it and can be more flexible. Still crying, Choi says he will keep that in mind next time. In an ironic tone, Readrun says that there's one more thing to mention. No matter how strong Choi feels or considers himself to be, there will always be someone stronger. Helping Choi up, Readrun tells him not to forget that a fair victory is a privilege only for the truly strong. Then Reed turns to Choi Hyunseok and says that's all for today, telling him that he did a good job. Readrun turns and leaves the area while Choi, feeling awkward, watches him walk away. The hero, nearly depressed, sits on the ground and concerned Rachel asks if he's alright. He responds that no, he's almost dying and asks her to heal him. Rachel begins the healing and Choi says that at least he can breathe now. This makes the fairy ask if she is now just a healing potion for him. While he's being healed, Choi has several thoughts in his mind. He remembers Abelson telling him to get stronger because only his belief in his own strength would protect him. Then he tells Rachel that Abelson said he needed to be stronger. Rachel gets angry because he's already talking about that woman again, and because of her, he almost lost his life. She doesn't know if she's a saint or a witch. Choi tells her that she could suffer divine punishment for saying such things. While still using the healing, Rachel remembers that the assassin used sacred power, so she questions why, if she is really a saint, he attacked her. Choi, thinking, says that she's right because the next saint should be a valuable existence, and that's not what happened. Choi becomes frustrated thinking about it and says that, in any case, he's done thinking about it. Then Rachel asks why he's so fond of her. Choi ignores her and says she's just jealous. Rachel yells that he's a woman-crazed moth and asks if he really wants to die. Shortly afterward, there was Choi, head down and sad, while Rachel and Bobo looked at him. Choi says that it's over for him and asks to be reborn as a rich family's cat in his next life, leaving their eyes confused by the situation. Rachel asks if Bobo is concerned and if he would accept someone like that as his master. Bobo still doesn't understand, so Rachel says she will tell him what happened. 30 minutes ago in Hemis's office. Hemis calls Choi Hyunseok and tells him that she has a big dilemma. She quickly says she's been bored for a long time, which surprises both Rachel and Choi with this sudden revelation. Sitting on her throne, Hemis says that because of this she should see something fun, and Choi just agrees. Hemis then says that he will have 1 month to train and defeat the battalion commander, which leaves him incredulous and nervous, asking if she really said that. With her aura emanating from her claws, she asks if something is wrong or if he can't do it. She asks if he wants her help, like she did with Mr. Donut in their fight against him. Remembering what she did, he bows, hitting his head on the table, and says that he doesn't need it and will handle it himself. Rachel then finishes recalling the events and Choi cries in the background. The fairy tells Bobo to say goodbye as he won't be seeing him for a long time. And now, I believe Bobo understands the situation. Rachel then turns to the hero and tells him that it's about time he accepts the fact that he's a hero, asking if he intends to defeat the battalion commander with only 9,000 power. Choi says he's already crying because of it and asks if Rachel wants him to die right now. While he laments, Rachel remembers that indeed Choi became strong quickly, but it's not enough because the battalion commander is on another level. Hyunseok remembers that the average battalion commander has a combat power of over 40,000 and he laments because there's no way to reach that number in such a short time. He looks at Bobo and thinks it would be wonderful if Bobo could replace him and fight in his place, as Bobo could fight on equal terms or even win against the battalion commander. While Bobo consoles him, Rachel says that the fight should be a duel and Choi confirms that. Only then does Choi have an idea, remembering what Hemis actually said. He then asks Rachel what Hemis had said, and Rachel replies that he has 1 month to defeat the battalion commander. He gets excited again because he realizes that at no point did Hemis mention a duel or a main fight. Rachel is left speechless, her eyes wide open. Choi then comes up with a plan because, no matter how he does it, he just needs to do it. The idea is to use anything to defeat the battalion commander, whether alone or not. Rachel asks if he's sure he should interpret it as he wishes. Biting his fingers nervously, Choi says that the only way is to lure the battalion commander out and set up an ambush with Bobo. Upon hearing this, Rachel asks what he is, as she doesn't know whether to consider him very intelligent or just a coward. Then Rachel asks how Choi will lure the commander out. She wonders if someone as careless as the hero has any way to persuade the commander. Holding a spice and smiling, Choi says yes, because he met the commander recently and knows that he enjoys savoring elegant meals. So Choi begins preparing the best recipe for grilled ribs. He selects the best ribs and goes through the entire process to make them incredible, soaking them in water with honey to remove the blood. Once the blood is removed, they should be left in a pot to cook quickly. While it's boiling, Choi chops the mushrooms and green onions, adds gushing fish, and stirs to combine the flavors. Then he adds everything into the pot with the meat and lets it boil. After at least half an hour of boiling, we see Bobo dragging Choi through the fortress corridors so fast that his body seems to separate from his soul. Upon arriving at the location, Choi can't bear it and collapses, questioning how it's possible for him to lose in terms of endurance if he's just a human. Quickly, Rachel stops the hero and tells him that it's burning, which leaves Choi terrified. Then we see the plate of ribs and stew complete and it looks delicious. Carefully, Choi places it on a plate, and with a smile he sprinkles finely chopped green onions on top, saying that the best stew, the key to unlocking the heart of Commander Doris, is ready. The table was full of delicious food, and Doris leaned back in satisfaction, a rare moment of peace washing over him. He took a deep breath, savoring the ambience, and reflected on how infrequent such refined, tranquil moments were in his position. The decision to pass Yuzaru on to Choi had been a stroke of genius, easing a burden he hadn't realized was so taxing. As he pondered this, a subordinate entered, bowing with measured respect. The air in the room shifted slightly as the servant cleared his throat before delivering a message. The cooking squadron had arrived to see him. Doris, though already sated, felt curiosity stir within him and gestured for the servant to continue. Without hesitation, Doris dismissed any possibility of returning Yuzaru, assuming that was the purpose of their visit. The subordinate hesitated before clarifying that Choi had come for a different reason. He wished to present a dish as a token of appreciation. Hearing this, Doris's eyes lit up. Whispers of Choi's extraordinary culinary skills had reached him, rumors painting him as a near-mythical figure in the kitchen. Now he would experience it firsthand. Straightening his posture, he gave his approval. A knock echoed through the room, and the doors swung open to reveal Choi making an exaggerated entrance, tray in hand, a mischievous glint in his eye, and a rose held between his teeth. Doris blinked, momentarily caught off guard before swiftly composing himself. Choi set the tray before him with a theatrical bow, expressing his gratitude for the opportunity that had led to his new title in the kitchen. Doris, unimpressed by words, expected the food to speak for itself. With a humble nod, Choi lifted the cover from the dish, revealing a steaming serving of urine ribs. A rich, tantalizing aroma filled the room, causing Doris to salivate despite himself. The presentation was impeccable, almost divine. Drawing in the fragrance, Doris found himself overwhelmed. Across from him, Choi watched knowingly, confident that one bite would send him into a world of indulgence. The moment Doris tasted it, disbelief overtook him. His widened eyes and forward-leaning posture betrayed his astonishment. The dish transcended human capability, reaching a level of perfection he had never imagined. Encouraged by the reaction, Choi suggested introducing more dishes in the future. Doris, without hesitation, accepted, willing to eat anything he prepared. As Choi exited, Rachel, standing by the door, struggled to contain her reaction. Doris, still enraptured by his meal, casually remarked on Choi's favored status. Barely making it outside, Choi gripped the doorknob, trembling. He and Rachel exchanged a glance before both succumbed to violent nausea. Rachel wiped her mouth, staring at Choi in disbelief. He acknowledged his actions, fully aware of the consequences. When pressed on his intentions, he made it clear. He would continue feeding Doris until the day came when he was nothing more than a pig fattened for slaughter. Meanwhile, inside the dining hall, Doris remained blissfully unaware, savoring each bite. A week passed. Doris sat before another grand meal, yet his appetite had noticeably waned. With a sigh, he idly prodded his food, burdened by looming concerns. An upcoming duel for the battalion commander position weighed on his mind. His growing influence had drawn unwanted attention, and failure meant forfeiting his title. Yet he accepted the stakes with a sense of dignity. Choi, realizing that a week of careful planning had failed to consider external threats, forced a smile and assured Doris of his impending victory after he invited him to watch the duel. The next day at the Grand Training Grounds, Rachel attempted to lift Choi's spirits with sarcasm. Choi, unimpressed, remained convinced that Doris stood no chance after everything he had been fed. Roiger, the Demon King's 3rd Army Corps Regiment commander, initiated the duel. The challenger, a humanoid figure with a horned skull, stepped forward. Opposite him, Doris ascended the stairs, panting from the effort. Yet, upon spotting Choi, a smirk surfaced on his lips. Roiger signaled the start. Doris barely reacted at first, his enthusiasm lacking, until the moment arrived. In a single motion, he seized his opponent's weapon. A shockwave erupted, forcing the audience to recoil from the impact. As the dust settled, the challenger lay motionless. Roiger, stunned, acknowledged Doris's overwhelming dominance and ended the match. Spectators dispersed, leaving Choi to contemplate his next move. That night, at Bobo's house, Choi analyzed the monster distribution map he had drawn. Rachel, peering over his shoulder, questioned his intentions. The plan was simple: pit monsters against each other, letting one enemy take out another. Rachel, after grasping the concept, understood the brilliance behind it. 3 days later, deep in the forest, Rachel groaned from exhaustion after memorizing endless monster entries. Choi had offered to divide the work, but she had refused, now regretting it. The dense foliage around them rustled as unseen creatures moved through the underbrush. Tension lingered in the air, each shadow carrying a hidden threat. The night was alive with distant roars and the snapping of twigs beneath massive feet. When asked about their first target, Choi pointed ahead. Rachel immediately identified it as a surfib, a massive forest worm. Despite its size, she dismissed it as useless for their plan due to its passive nature. Puffing her chest with pride over her deduction, she sought approval. Choi, unimpressed, remarked that even a fool could be useful. A soldier approached and inquired about their next hunting location. Choi told him to wait before asking Rachel about dragon-like monsters with steel-like scales. She replied that several types fit that description and that she would need to see it directly to identify it. This meant they had no choice but to face the creature head-on. Choi then announced to the cooking squadron that they would be sweeping the area clean. There was no need for captures. Everyone was free to kill to their heart's content. He even gave them permission to eat their prey immediately. The soldiers were ecstatic. They felt that their commander had finally come to his senses, celebrating the opportunity to eat their fill. They cut down monsters relentlessly, harvesting their meat until the supply piled up. Choi observed the results of their efforts but noted that the true owner of the territory had yet to reveal itself. He began to worry that their efforts had been in vain. Deciding to halt the operation, he ordered everyone to put away their weapons. The platoon commander ensured that his orders were followed. However, just as they began to settle, an unexpected sound caught Choi's attention. He immediately sensed that something had arrived. Birds scattered into the sky as a monstrous presence made itself known. A dragon's eye glared down at them from above. The creature, Nidrak, was a beast of immeasurable combat power. The soldiers panicked at the sight of the dragon and scattered in fear. In response, Nidrak set the area ablaze. Choi, however, was pleased. With a monster of this caliber, he now had a weapon strong enough to defeat Doris. At Hemis's office, she spoke to Reed Run about her growing concerns. 3 weeks had passed without any news from Choi. She speculated that Reed Run might have been training him for something extraordinary. He dismissed the notion, stating that their training was nothing out of the ordinary. Hemis then asked for his assessment of Choi's chances against the battalion commander. Without hesitation, Reed Run replied that there was no chance of victory. However, he did note that Choi had been getting close to Doris recently. This information caught Hemis off guard. She recalled how Choi had once claimed he would defeat the battalion commander, yet he seemed to be growing closer to him instead. This contradiction left her curious about his true intentions. At Doris's office, he continued eating, enjoying the grilled meat prepared by Choi. He thanked him for the meal. Choi, letting out a sigh, caught Doris's attention. Sensing something was wrong, Doris questioned him about it. Choi, putting on a pitiful act, claimed that there was a serious problem within the squadron. He hinted that this could be the last time he would be able to treat Doris to a meal. Alarmed by this statement, Doris pressed him for details. Choi then explained that the corps commander had requested a special type of monster meat, but the creature was far too powerful to handle. Choi continued his deception, reinforcing the illusion that their squadron was struggling to subdue a formidable monster. He named the creature Marbling, a name unfamiliar to Doris, who had only heard rumors of numerous injuries among the cooks. Choi reassured him of the monster's existence, emphasizing the danger it posed and the futility of sending more ordinary soldiers. Instead, he suggested that someone of Doris's strength could handle it effortlessly, promising that such a feat would not go unnoticed by the corps commander. The thought of recognition from Hemis stirred something in Doris. He imagined her regarding him fondly, her words lifting him from the status of a mere glutton to something more. The fantasy left him flustered. Choi, capitalizing on this reaction, assured him that he would relay his accomplishments personally, strengthening the illusion of camaraderie. Though Doris feigned reluctance, he ultimately agreed to help, seeing Choi as a friend. Choi expressed gratitude, but beneath his polite demeanor, his expression twisted into a sinister grin. The following day, the operation was set in motion. At the designated location, Choi gathered his forces, ensuring every step was carefully planned. Rachel confirmed whether he had memorized the terrain, to which he responded with absolute confidence, likening himself to a living navigation system. He then whispered to Bobo, subtly affirming that their true target was Doris. Yuzaru, lacking complexity in thought, simply prepared to execute his given task without question. With everything in place, the mission commenced. Deep within the great forest, the soldiers were oblivious to their true purpose. Their only knowledge was that they were being sent to hunt a dangerous monster. Doris, irritated by the harshness of the wilderness, questioned the distance to their target. Choi assured him they were approaching Marbling's territory, all the while maintaining extreme caution. He understood that Doris was more formidable than he appeared, but he had faith that Nidrak would emerge victorious. Suddenly the atmosphere shifted. Birds scattered in distress, signaling an imminent threat. Choi warned Darius that something was approaching. Darius, now alert, prepared himself. From the shadows, Nidrak emerged, its presence overwhelming. Confused, Darius questioned whether this was the marbling he had been told about, finding its appearance somewhat familiar. Choi dismissed his doubts, remarking that many monsters looked alike. Accepting this, Darius viewed it as nothing more than another beast to slay. With unwavering confidence, Darius commanded his battalion to attack, trusting that Choi would ensure his victory reached the corps commander's ears. His soldiers surged forward, engaging the dragon with reckless abandon. Darius himself lunged into battle, unleashing his formidable techniques. Despite Nidrak's immense power, Darius's sheer brutality kept him pressing forward. Choi observed with growing concern, realizing that Darius was more resourceful than anticipated. Instead of facing Nidrak directly, he used his soldiers as fodder, sacrificing them to create openings for his own attacks. Choi had intended for the battle to overwhelm Darius, but the demon's methodical approach threatened to undo his plan. Before Darius could land a decisive blow, a panicked soldier interrupted, reporting the arrival of another creature. Choi's expression darkened. He had miscalculated, this territory belonged to Nidrak alone. The presence of an additional monster disrupted his scheme. Retreat was immediately ordered, but before they could escape, a massive worm-like creature emerged. It was a Surfib, an entity Choi had initially dismissed due to its supposed non-aggressive nature. However, perceiving the ongoing battle as a territorial dispute, the Surfib prepared to fight. Darius quickly called for a full withdrawal, but Rachel realized that allowing him to escape would jeopardize everything. Choi knew he had no other choice. With a swift, decisive motion, he launched an attack. Using the read-run combat style's first form, he struck Darius, ensuring he had no time to process what had happened. His voice rang out, demanding that the retreat be cancelled. He called upon the demons to stand their ground, invoking their pride and courage. The chaos intensified as the battlefield descended into further disarray. Amidst it all, Darius registered the pain and the deafening roar of battle around him. Darius felt a surge of rage as he questioned whether he was being betrayed by a mere primitive human. Consumed by anger, he called out Choi's name, determined to risk everything to confront him. Activating his skill, Full Bloom, he unleashed a devastating attack. Choi, unaware of what was happening, found himself with no escape. Rachel urged him to run, but before he could react, he was struck by what felt like a bolt of lightning. The force nearly killed him, leaving him in shock and confusion about the nature of the attack. Through the chaos, Choi spotted Darius standing firm on the battlefield, declaring his intent to tear him apart while he was still alive. Realizing the imminent danger, Choi quickly assessed the situation, wondering about the whereabouts of Bobo and Yuzaru. Meanwhile, Rachel scanned the battlefield and noticed that Surfib's attack had caught everyone in its range. Choi felt as though he had been left alone to face Darius, who was seething with rage. Despite Darius' overwhelming fury, Choi saw him coughing up blood, recognizing that his opponent was pushing himself beyond his limits. Deciding to stall for time, Choi sprinted as fast as he could, instructing Rachel to call out the monster clusters from the map she had shown earlier. She complied, reading them aloud as she saw them. If Choi continued straight, he would reach the Warhound habitat. Darius, undeterred by the surroundings, pursued him relentlessly, showing no concern for the monsters in his path. Choi knew that while most creatures would avoid the strong, a habitat with younglings would provoke an aggressive response. Darius dismissed Choi's tactics as feeble tricks, determined to ensure his demise. Channeling his strength, he unleashed a level 3 technique, Falling Flowers. His power surged, fueled by his deep belief that promotion was the greatest weapon of a demon. With confidence in his overwhelming strength, he prepared to end Choi once and for all. However, something felt off. His body wavered, and he suddenly coughed up a significant amount of blood. Choi, having stopped to observe, listened as Rachel pointed out that Darius' demonic energy was depleting rapidly. Darius realized too late that he had reached his limit. Expending excessive energy while hunting demonic beasts had left him drained. Acknowledging the situation, he turned away, unwillingly accepting that he could not continue. Choi called out to him, questioning his retreat. Darius, though displeased, admitted there was no choice but to recover first. He vowed to return and exact vengeance, declaring that he would never forget this humiliation. Before he could leave, Choi refused to let him escape so easily. Calling out to him, he taunted the demon, stating that he had entered on his own terms but would not be allowed to leave so freely. Doris dismissed his challenge, ridiculing Choi for thinking he could be defeated by mere fists. But Choi was prepared. Activating Ride Run Combat Art 7th movement, he unleashed the explosive destruction wave. To his surprise, Doris endured the attack, proving his resilience. The demon smirked, accusing Choi of underestimating him. Before the battle could continue, an unexpected presence arrived. A voice cut through the battlefield, observing the fight with amusement. Hemis had appeared, questioning the commotion unfolding before her castle. A sudden explosion sent Choi flying into a tree, leaving him disoriented and in pain. As he cradled his head, trying to grasp the situation, Doris turned to the corps commander, pleading for her intervention. He insisted that he had not yet lost and argued that this was not the final battle. Hemis, unimpressed, silenced him immediately. She mocked his incompetence, incredulous that a human had managed to beat him so severely. Given their ongoing war with humans, she found the thought of someone like Doris holding the rank of battalion commander utterly disgraceful. The mere idea made her shudder. She resolved to eliminate him on the spot. Choi, seizing the moment, rushed forward and boldly declared to the corps commander that he had successfully defeated the battalion commander. Without hesitation, he kicked Doris, sending his blood splattering onto Hemis' face. Acknowledging their previous bet, she considered the outcome and extended an invitation to Choi, indicating that they had much to discuss. As they spoke, Hemis learned that even a Serphib had joined the chaos at the end. Choi admitted he had not anticipated that development either. Curious about his thought process, Hemis casually suggested that perhaps cutting open his head would provide some answers. Hemis acknowledged that Choi had manipulated the situation against her, finding his methods cunning and distasteful. Despite her disapproval, she admitted his success but warned him that such an opportunity would not come again. If he ever resorted to deceit or caused trouble in the future, the consequences would be severe. At Bobo's house, Choi lay sprawled on the floor, drained from the recent events but relieved to have survived. Still recovering, he inquired about Doris' polymorph and the concept of promotion. Rachel speculated that it might be a martial art exclusive to demons and suggested consulting the cow-headed one for answers. As Bobo barked, Choi acknowledged the hardships the creature endured amidst the chaos, recognizing that the corps commander had resolved the situation swiftly. Reflecting on the battle, Choi admitted feeling a shred of pity for Doris, believing he was not entirely a bad opponent. However, Rachel pointed out that he had delivered the final blow intentionally to secure all the experience points. In response, Choi offered a hollow apology, but beneath the hand covering his face, a wicked grin revealed his true thoughts. Curious about his progress, Choi checked his level and discovered that he had advanced significantly. However, his status window displayed question marks, which puzzled him. Assuming it was an error, he voiced his concerns, but Rachel dismissed the idea, insisting that the hero system could not possibly malfunction. She believed he was joking, but Choi remained serious before deciding to drop the subject. To mark his achievement of reaching level 48, Rachel suggested measuring his combat power. After glancing at the readings, she revealed that his combat strength had now reached 13,936. Choi took pride in the drastic increase, recalling how not long ago, he had struggled even against a simple goblin. As a surprise, Rachel produced a beer, offering a moment of celebration. They drank, cheered, and basked in the victory. Yet, amidst the light-hearted moment, despite the calm, I could sense the impending danger and chaos. Sometime later, Choi returns to his inevitable routine, divided between sleeping, preparing, hunting, eating, cooking, training, and resting. He lives this loop of tasks daily and endlessly, regardless of how strong he becomes. While preparing for a training session, wrapping bandages around his hands, Choi wonders if he should find Abelson after training to clear up remaining doubts. Riadrun arrives, surprised that Choi showed up early for training, and they greet each other. Riadrun smiles while speaking with a tone of pride about Choi having defeated Doris and congratulates him. Choi thanks him shyly. Choi then takes advantage of the topic and decides to question Riadrun about something particular that happened during the fight against Doris. When asked if he knows anything about the technique called promote, Riadrun reflects with his hand on his chin, remembering it to be an informal style of ancient combat. The word informal makes Choi curious. Riadrun then explains that there are two forms of combat: formal, which involves movement, and informal, which is detached from formal structures. He also explains that, compared to formal combat, informal combat has significantly fewer variations. Since formal combat itself is already rare, informal is passed on more secretly. Choi then deduces that the difference is in summary something like attack damage versus skill damage. Ryudrun continues, saying that despite everything, promote is a style that has been passed down for quite a long time. Any demon who uses demonic chi can learn it. However, it is an extremely dangerous ability that few dare to use. It has many side effects. Choi then asks if there is a possibility for him to learn how to use promote, since he possesses some demonic chi. Ryudrun jokes about the amount of chi that Choi claims to have, emphasizing that besides being little, it is not natural to him, nor is it real demonic chi. Choi, in fact, seems to have ignored the warning that it is extremely dangerous. Choi uses the given argument that his chi is little to claim that the consequences may be mild and, in the worst case, Abelson could help. Ryudrun, facing Choi's insistence, resists the idea of training such an ability. Choi, in contrast, is frustrated with the delay in giving a final answer. Desperate for approval, Choi throws himself to his knees, grabbing Ryudrun by the leg. In an attempt to gain acceptance, Choi argues fiercely that without promote, he will die. He argues that all the fights are meaningless, where his life is reduced to being a tiny ant with an expiration date for the commander. Finally, he swears not to insist if a single attempt goes wrong. Ryudrun, convinced, understands all the points that Choi made and agrees to the training. Ryudrun confesses to being uncertain, but he made a promise, from which he cannot back out, to Choi's relief. Ryudrun then announces the beginning of training and demands that Choi pay close attention. The scene changes not to the underground prison of the Empire of Gartran. There, a shackled prisoner receives a visit from a man in white robes. The man in white greets the prisoner, whose name is Geffen. Geffen replies that he was wondering who was coming, surprised that it is the Pope. Geffen then asks what the Pope wants, since he had said he had no more business with him. The Pope responds that he brings an opportunity to make peace. Geffen then asks what he needs to do. The Pope, with a malicious look, responds that the mission is to eliminate Abelson. Geffen is surprised by the mission, asking why not a rescue and why the orders suddenly changed. He also asks what the church will gain if the goddess dies. The Pope responds with irony that it is not something Geffen needs to know. Geffen shows concern as there is a glutton there. The Pope reassures Geffen. He replies that he will place 4 warriors with him and that the glutton will be out for a while. The Pope then finishes with a threat, telling Geffen to succeed, stating that failures will not be tolerated. Back at the training field, Choi agonizes as a red energy emanates from his body and foam comes out of his mouth. Abelson is beside him, worried, asking Choi to try to control himself. Ryudrun just watches without reacting. Meanwhile, Abelson scolds them for practicing demonic combat techniques, saying it's a madness considering that Choi is human. Ryudrun argues that at every moment Choi claimed to be fine, and after so much time training there shouldn't be much demonic QI left. Abelson, enraged, disregards Ryudrun's words and retorts, asking if they are healers. There's no way they could determine that Choi was fine since they're not specialists in that. Abelson explains that she had controlled and sealed Choi's demonic QI, but during the training it was undone as they thought they could handle it. Ryudrun then asks what's going to happen to Choi, and Abelson replies that she won't be able to hold the situation as it is. She says it's too late to try to seal the demonic QI. Instead of sealing it, she decides to try to make Choi's body adapt to the energy flow. Abelson tries to compress the demonic QI and suppress it with divine energy to spread it out so that it stops being concentrated, and that way Choi's body can endure it. Ryudrun is surprised by the idea and questions if it's really possible. Abelson shows that she's not completely sure because she's never done anything like it before, nor has she ever heard of another deity doing it. There's even a chance that the demonic QI will rebel against the divine power and get even more out of control. Nevertheless, she decides to insist on the idea even if it results in the worst. In the end, time is passing and there's no other choice but to try. Sometime later, Choi wakes up in his room startled. He tries to get up, wondering what must have happened, as if a lot of time had suddenly passed. Suddenly he is hit by Rachel and Bobo, who throw themselves on Choi, happy that he finally woke up. Rachel doesn't hide her joy as she fervently repeats that Choi finally woke up after 3 days. Choi is shocked by how long he slept, which leads Rachel to ask if he doesn't remember anything. Choi replies that he remembers trying to learn promote and tries to check if anything changed in his system window. Upon checking, Choi notices that something has changed. He finds a new status called demonic QI accompanied by question marks in the system window. While calmly checking it, he is interrupted by someone's arrival. Ryudrun and the commander enter the room, and the commander jokes, saying she knew Choi would wake up. Choi tries to get up to greet the commander, staggering. However, the commander says he doesn't need to strain himself in his current state as he can barely get on his knees. The commander then points out that she heard from Riedrun that Choi was practicing the use of demonic QI. Choi gets nervous when questioned why he didn't tell them about it. The commander approaches Choi, evaluating his condition, knowing that the goddess was the one who healed him, stating that it was worth having been revered as a saint. After all, she did a good job. Choi gets confused by the mention of the saint. The commander turns to Choi, conjuring dark energy from her mouth, saying that the demonic QI training isn't over yet. This time, she herself will give a special help. After all, as Choi himself said, he is a little ant that belongs to her. The commander strikes Choi on the neck with her magic like a snake, biting him and instantly putting him into shock. Riedrun tries to ask what's happening. The commander responds that it's nothing to worry about Choi, he will just need to rest a bit more. Choi watches them leaving for a meeting with the Demon King in his last conscious seconds. Days later, at Bobo's house, the saint finishes another day of healing Choi's body. Abelson has been treating Choi since the day of the incident during training. After she finishes, Choi thanks her for always helping, and internally, he's grateful for the chance to see her every day. Abelson mentions there's no need for thanks, since it was Choi's willpower that helped stabilize the crisis. She also murmurs that thanks aren't necessary because he is her hope. Choi doesn't understand Abelson's murmur and asks her to repeat it. She ignores the request and says goodbye, saying she's done everything she had to for the day. Choi is left confused, thinking about other times the saint said things he couldn't understand, and how many strange things are happening in this world, leaving many questions. The only thing left for Choi is to wait for things to unfold. Later that night, Choi and Riedrun are together, with the hero receiving lessons on the theory of demonic chi manipulation. Riedrun, however, warns Choi not to overdo it. Choi says he's fine, as it's already been 3 days since he woke up and he'll be okay as long as he doesn't use that type of magic again. Riedrun then recalls that it's been exactly 3 days since the commander left. As Choi continues talking, Riedrun gets lost in his thoughts. He reflects that even though the meeting is an annual and recurring event, this particular year feels like there's something strange involved. Choi notices Riedrun is distracted and calls his attention, prompting an apology from him. Choi mentions that Riedrun has been very busy in recent days. He offers to help if necessary, as Riedrun has been handling command duties alone. Riedrun replies that everything is fine and the commander will return soon. Even if she was summoned earlier this time, it won't change much of the routine. He ends by telling Choi to focus on himself, and Choi accepts it as an order. Riedrun observes that Choi is getting stronger over time. He also notes that now that he has demonic chi, his strength should develop even more. Choi will only need to remain stable in his current state to achieve tremendous results. As he watches Choi, Riedrun senses an unusual movement. He quickly realizes its divine power and becomes alert. Standing up, he surprises Choi with his sudden change in behavior. He then explains that he sensed the presence of someone with divine power in the castle who isn't the saint. Before Choi can process it, Riedrun confirms it's an intruder. Riedrun then orders Choi to stay quiet while he goes to investigate the situation. The scene shifts to the castle's hallways, where 4 men in black cloaks are gathered. They discuss how entering the castle was relatively easy. One of the men comments that this ease came from the commander being away. Geffen, instead of responding, demands silence. He knows and warns that even without the commander, there's still an opponent they must be wary of. When Geffen mentions the name Red Nightmare, Riedrun appears in front of the group, demanding to know how they knew about Commander Hemis's absence. Realizing they're facing the one they feared, one of the men panics, confirming it is Red Nightmare, while Geffen tells the group not to lose composure as they assume battle positions. Geffen then assigns 2 of the men to go after Abelson, while the other stays with him to fight Riedrun. Realizing their goal is the saint, Riedrun becomes concerned because the room where she is confined is not far from their current location. Clenching his fists, he becomes frustrated, knowing that dealing with all 4 would be easy, but handling 2 while the other 2 escape is much more complicated. Suddenly, a voice echoes down the corridor. Choi appears, asking if everything is alright, anxious because Riedrun had left the room with such a serious expression. Riedrun scolds Choi, saying he was very clear when he ordered him to stay in the room. But internally he is grateful that Choi showed up. He then asks Choi to pay attention to a new command. Explaining that the intruders are after Abelson, Choi must reach her before they do and escape with her. Riedrun throws his necklace to Choi, who is confused about what to do with the accessory. Geffen charges at Riedrun before he could finish the instructions, and even so, while defending himself, Riedrun explains that the necklace will serve to convince high-ranking officers of the situation. Choi promptly follows his path at full speed. Geffen, irritated, orders his companion to go after Choi and stop him. Meanwhile, Riedrun finally decides to attack, making it clear that Abelson will not leave the castle without the commander's permission by anyone's hands. Riedrun activates his combat-style 7th movement, attacking Geffen with powerful strikes. He also launches a blow called Explosive Destruction Wave, his eyes glowing red with determination. Meanwhile, Choi runs as fast as he can to reach Abelson's room. As he runs, a mission window appears. The mission this time describes that evil men are trying to kill Abelson and Choi must protect her, and who knows, maybe after that a romance might arise with a reward of 1,000 points. Knowing that the humans are actually trying to kill the saint makes Choi anxious. Another detail in the message that confuses him is the large amount of points awarded if he manages to complete the mission. Upon arriving at Abelson's room, Choi urgently announces that they need to get out of there immediately because humans are attacking. Abelson is caught by surprise and does not understand what is happening, so Choi explains that it is an attack from the same people who attacked previously. Meanwhile, in the nearby corridors, Riedrun's troops delay the intruders' advance. The comrades warn Choi not to waste time and to flee with the saint. Choi immediately grabs the saint by the hand and in a swift motion places her on his shoulder. With no time to apologize for the lack of courtesy, he runs carrying Abelson. The scene shifts to a room where a meeting is being led by the 3rd Commander Roiger. He comments on Doris's defeat by a low-level human with a tone of disappointment. The memory of the commander asking him to take care of correcting everything while she's away takes over, and Roiger wonders why he was chosen for such a task. Focusing on the meeting, he decides to end it as there's nothing more to be discussed and asks everyone to follow the orders. Suddenly, a goblin interrupts with an urgent report. He explains that Choi has arrived carrying Riedrun's necklace, and Roiger tries to understand the situation. The goblin then explains that other humans are attacking the castle trying to find Abelson. Roiger receives the message and becomes irritated with such inconvenience. Moments later, Roiger encounters Choi accompanied by Abelson in a corridor, who intends to explain the situation in more detail. Choi then begins to tell that Riedrun detected divine power within the castle, and promptly went after the intruders who turned out to be humans seeking to put an end to Abelson. Roiger does not believe that humans would attempt on the saint's life, and asks Choi to calm down, thinking it must be some mistake. In a brief moment, Roiger senses something strange approaching, and before he can react, with only enough time to tell everyone there to protect themselves, a devastating attack hits the corridor windows, signaling the arrival of another enemy. Now, with no more doubt about the human's objective, Roiger is stunned by the reality he is witnessing. Roiger, seeing that the enemies are approaching the saint, casts a restriction spell to try to stop them. However, the distance is too great, being insufficient to stop both attackers. Choi decides to act, preparing to use the 7th movement of Riedrun's combat art. Before one of the enemies could reach Abelson, Choi hits him from behind with a powerful punch, knocking him out instantly. Choi shouts as he attacks, declaring that he will protect Abelson. Meanwhile, in Riedrun's battle, one of the invaders has already been defeated, while Geffen mocks the loss of his companion after having used him as a shield. Riedrun already expected Geffen to be a strong opponent, but even so, the level of Geffen's strength is surprising, equating to that of a commander. Besides strength, divine power and demonic IQ are natural enemies. Such points are essential to classify warriors like Geffen as heroes of humanity. Geffen laughs while belittling Riedrun, considering his struggle against the 2 invaders as proof that he is just another ordinary demon. Riedrun keeps his composure, questioning how someone with no chance of victory can be so arrogant. Geffen asks who could possibly stop him now that the commander is not present and Red Nightmare is not all it was believed to be. Confident in his strategy, Geffen only needs to keep Riedrun occupied while his comrades deal with the weaker henchmen. Riedrun takes on a more serious stance as the enemy has demonstrated deep knowledge of the castle's defense strategies. Determined to end the clash, Riedrun declares he no longer has time for talk and will finish this quickly. Geffen smiles and asks how Riedrun plans to end the fight quickly, considering their powers are incompatible. Riedrun responds that pure brute force can overcome any incompatibility. Meanwhile, in Choi's fight, after knocking out one of the invaders, Choi hears the other one say he didn't know there was another hero in the Demon King's army. The man laments that he didn't expect 3 corrupted humans to be on the Demon King's side. Choi ignores the enemy's concern and warns that the invasion plan has already failed and that all castle allies are on their way. Choi also declares that no matter how strong this enemy may be, there's no way to fight an entire army and the best strategy is to surrender. The man scoffs at the hero's statement, asking if he's sure the invasion has actually failed. Nearby, Roiger wonders when the hero learned Riedrun's combat arts, but also feels grateful that it allowed them to capture one of the invaders. The captured invader mutters something inaudible which soon reveals itself to be an incantation, a spell to use his own body as a sacrifice and quickly spread flames. He used sacred magic to burn himself completely, creating fire as a last resort, forming a wall of fire, a blaze that creates a kind of flaming arena. These flames are capable of killing a person with just a single touch. The man, now more confident, raises his sword while stating that not even the highest-ranking demons will be able to easily pass through the wall of fire, giving the hero the only option, which is to hand over Abelson. Choi is caught in distress, desperate, not understanding why the humans are interested in killing the saint. Choi desperately wants to know why they want to attack someone who is on their side. The man does not acknowledge Choi's statement, and when he tries to explain the obvious, Abelson decides to speak for herself. The divided empire abandoned God a long time ago. Choi is caught off guard by the information, and Abelson continues explaining that the only thing the empire needs is a puppet that obeys commands. For that it doesn't matter whether it is the real saint or not. Tired of the conversation, the man strikes his sword to the ground. He declares that he no longer wants to hear drama and will give the hero a 10-second head start. Choi finds himself under pressure, with no safe strategy to withstand a direct fight for long. The only thing that comes to mind is exactly the riskiest possible option. While the man begins his 10-second countdown, Choi starts activating Promote. Upon activating the first level of the magic, Choi immediately causes concern in Abelson, because she realizes what he plans to do. The saint tries to warn him that his body won't withstand it and tries to make him stop, but time is running out. Nothing will be able to convince Choi because he already believes that everyone is going to die, so the only thing left is to fight with everything he has. Pushing the technique to its limit, reaching full stage 2, Choi still hasn't given up on evolving Promote. He recalls Riedrun's instructions, who explained that Promote has 3 stages named Bloom, Full Bloom, and Falling Flowers. Each step taken increases the risk to the user, highlighting that Choi should never think of going that far. Although he must master the previous level before moving on to the next, reaching the 3rd level is too risky. But Choi saw no choice in the face of certain death. So he decides that if he manages to do it, this will be the only time. After 7 seconds, Choi finally reaches the peak. His heart feels like it's about to explode while his body screams for him to stop this madness. Rachel, desperate, cannot believe that even with the situation so dire, using Promote is the only solution. Choi, however, is completely focused, ignoring any contradiction. He has only one step left to take, which is to act. Because Promote has already reached level 3. With his body completely transformed, crimson eyes and dark aura, Choi asks Rachel to use her buff abilities. Time is up. The man is surprised to see a human using Promote, recognizing that Choi is not just anyone. Choi ignores the dialogue and announces the start of his offensive. He then dashes forward at high speed toward the man, who decides to defend against Choi's blows. He recognizes the level 3 of the ability, opting to defend because, being human, Choi will soon run out of stamina to keep attacking. Choi once again ignores the man's words, throwing even more punches against the sword. The enemy is confident that his victory will come simply by waiting, but Choi suddenly repels the sword with his fists, leaving the enemy disarmed and open to attacks. Before the invader could even react, Choi lands a precise, powerful punch right in the enemy's chest. The blow was enough to destabilize the man, who complains about the tricks Choi used. He watches as Choi prepares, astonished at a human who allowed himself to be corrupted by demon arts. Choi knows he's reaching the limit of what his body can endure from the technique, but he cannot fall, because he is the only barrier between the assassin and Abelson. Remembering that Promote, if pushed to the limit, can bring irreversible consequences, Choi finds a reason to go even further. There's a beautiful woman crying in front of him, and that is unacceptable. Dying for her to stop crying is undoubtedly a good deal. Now, with his body doomed to perish, Choi's only option is to move forward, surpassing all limits. There is no turning back. Choi decides to give his all to protect Abelson. The saint, witnessing Choi's unshakable will in his pursuit to neutralize the threat, reflects on the danger of using holy power on Choi, who is taken over by demonic chi. That would cause Choi's body to explode immediately. All that remains is for Abelson to pray for him. Choi, determined, advances toward the enemy, activating his combat arts. The man realizes that Choi is stacking attack types and laughs, considering it self-mutilation. Choi ignores the enemy's provocation and charges a jump, attacking with his instant obliteration strike. The enemy keeps intimidating, saying Choi will regret it when facing death. As he delivers his blow, the enemy counters with his sword, declaring it was a very weak attack, but Choi continues charging a much more powerful strike. Not just one more blow but a combo of attacks. This time there was no room for the invader to utter a single word. The overwhelming power of Choi's simultaneous strikes left him stunned. All that was left was to wait for the barrage of attacks to annihilate him. The violence of the strikes was so great that it destroyed part of the castle's structure, sending a massive beam of red energy into the sky. The enemy finally perished. Choi briefly observed the damage he had done to the invader before finally freeing himself from the promote. Rachel immediately noticed that Choi had succumbed, while Abelson panicked and rushed to try and help. Before Choi collapsed unconscious, the saint held him, keeping him seated while checking the hero's shocking physical condition. Abelson noticed that Choi could barely breathe. She tried to talk to the hero to give him strength, but suddenly, a scream startled the saint. The defeated enemy stood up again, furious, declaring that Choi would become a threat to the empire. The enemy managed to gather strength just to end Choi's life. But a massive hand grabbed his head, foiling his plans. Riadrun arrived on the scene, apologizing for the delay, and finally putting an end to the invader. The saint watched while caring for Choi as Riadrun wiped ketchup from the enemy's head. Riadrun quickly noticed that Choi had used, again breaking the promise, the arts they had trained. He then asked if the saint could take care of Choi, and she promptly replied that she would once again do her very best. Worried about how far the hero went to save her, Abelson prayed that he would not perish. The scene shifts to the waiting room in the Demon King's castle. It's the 5th day of the commander's meeting. There, Hemis is complaining about the food and is promptly confronted by a woman who tells her to stop whining and eat what was given, calling Hemis a big mouth. The woman is Park Hyuna, the 4th commander of the Demon King's army. Hemis mocks Hyuna's affront, calling her disrespectful and pointing out that if it weren't for the non-aggression pact between commanders, Hyuna would have died many times already at Hemis's hands. Such a statement made the 4th commander very irritated. Before a bigger argument could break out, a humanoid hamster enters the room yelling. He brings information to Hemis, saying there's something urgent coming from the Black Fortress. Hemis asks what's going on, and the hamster replies that the Gartran Empire attacked the fortress. The attack was carried out by 4 knights, one of them at hero level. The assault resulted in many casualties and injuries. Hemis hears the details and then turns her gaze to Hyuna, smiling and sarcastically pointing out the change in the regular meeting schedule, coinciding precisely with the attack on the fortress. That attitude left Hyuna in an awkward position. While finally enjoying the food, Hemis mentions the given coincidence, thinking about the Demon King. Meanwhile, in Choi's room he wakes up again after using promote, this time surprised that he managed to recover. Rachel quickly approaches, grabbing Choi by the hair, irritated by the hero's recklessness that almost got him killed. Choi begs for mercy, saying he's still a patient. Choi jokes that, considering the pain he felt from Rachel's blow, he's definitely alive, even though he thought he had been defeated. Rachel then explains that he was indeed defeated because, even after using all the combined techniques and hitting the enemy directly, the villain still managed to remain standing in the end, while Choi was unconscious. But before the enemy could strike back, Riadrun arrived and ended the game. The cowhead guy saved everyone with just one blow. Choi listens to the explanation in awe. Rachel continues narrating the events, explaining that after the battle, Riadrun and Abelson took care of Choi, giving him the necessary treatment to recover. Finally, she and Bobo also took part in the care. No less important, both Riadrun and Abelson described it as a miracle that Choi came out alive and asked him not to repeat that recklessness, so he wouldn't make others worry again. Choi then points his finger at Rachel, who immediately gets irritated, thinking Choi is about to argue with her. However, he just gently touches her face and apologizes for making her worry, thanking her for all the care. Rachel lets her guard down and the two are fine again. A few hours later, Riadrun and Commander Hemis go visit Choi. While the commander plays with Bobo, Riadrun repeatedly says that Choi was only able to use the technique the way he did because of the demonic chi Hemis put in him. Riadrun also asks if Choi thinks he has 9 lives to keep acting recklessly, reminding him once again that he's only alive because of Hemis, and Choi states that he's already gotten the message. Hemis, while playing with Bobo, gets annoyed by the conversation. Choi asks how the meeting went, and Hemis says she doesn't care about what happened there because what matters more is taking care of the headquarters. That's why she simply abandoned the meeting and returned to the fortress. Choi is shocked by Hemis's attitude, since it was a meeting with the Demon King. Hemis smiles as she notes that the Demon King might have gotten a little upset. Meanwhile, Choi and Riadrun get chills thinking about what that could lead to. Hemis has more interesting matters at the fortress. Choi's performance after she put her own demonic chi in him behaved as if it were his own. While Riedrun and Choi fear the wrath of the Demon King, Hemis is delighted by how interesting Choi is. The scene then focuses on the moment when Hemis meets the Demon King. In the memory, she emphasizes that even during all the battles from the first to the last fought by the Demon King, she remained by his side, following his purpose. Hemis believed that all of the king's actions were with the intention of protecting. The Demon King Tigrad tries to move things along, asking what she means after all. Hemis then gets straight to the point and explains that if the Demon King's plans go against her, they will have a problem. Tigrad responds that Hemis's attitude is insolent and that what she's saying basically means she will no longer obey him. Additionally, Tigrad asks if the fact that Hemis has lived for a long time made her bored, as he sees it as a way for her to kill time. Hemis replies that she already knew that would be Tigrad's reaction and that she doesn't plan to fight him, which is why she will leave. But before going, Hemis looks at Tigrad once more and asks who is really getting bored as time goes by, and tells him to think carefully as this is her final warning as a longtime companion. And after that farewell, Hemis goes to meet Choi, and the scene returns to the moment when Hemis and Riedrun leave. Choi shows respect as the duo walks, and Hemis turns to Riedrun, congratulating him, which makes Riedrun curious about the reason for the congratulations. Hemis explains that he managed to handle a hero-class human on his own and asks if it wouldn't be time for him to evolve into a higher hierarchical position. Riedrun thanks her for the compliments but replies that he doesn't think it's the right time for that. Hemis asks why not, and Riedrun promptly responds that he's still interested in training and following Choi's growth, and with that he also wants to learn more from Hemis's own teachings. That will be good for his personal growth. Hemis briefly smiles, and after a moment she decides to go straight to the point, confirming whether the castle turned into 3 chunks due to the human invasion. Riedrun confirms that yes, and he has no excuse for it. Hemis then says she thinks everyone has gotten lazy, as she didn't even arrive at the front lines. So she gets the idea to start a tournament to select a commander for the Third Army. The scene then cuts back to Choi, who is viewing his shop through the system. He notes that even after upgrading the hero shop to the intermediate level, he still has 950 points left, and it would be a waste to let them sit unused. He wonders if there's anything interesting he could buy. Rachel questions if, since he finished another quest and gained another 1,000 points, that was to be expected. Choi focuses on browsing the shop, excited that after evolving the shop level, there are way more things to explore, seeing all kinds of items and even cosmetics. When asked by Rachel if he's actually going to buy something, Choi reflects that even though there are countless options, all of them are very basic and don't even offer bonus stats, considering their high cost. Rachel agrees, pointing out that all those items could be destroyed like paper by Hydro. Taking another look at the shop, Choi notices that some accessories have different options, but they're hard to understand. So he decides to first upgrade his combat power gauge. Before proceeding, Choi notices something and asks what this item called Wrath and Magic Creation is. Rachel then explains that it's not an item, it's more related to something like a unique skill from the creation system, where Choi can, for example, turn his kick into a skill and then level it up. Even though they're the same kicks, they'll probably hit harder. Choi reflects on Rachel's words. After proceeding, deducting 500 hero points, the system begins the creation process, analyzing the hero's mana and physical movements for a period, with the duration of the analysis being manageable by Choi himself. The countless pieces of information leave Choi confused, and as soon as he understands how the system records movements, he becomes amazed by the skill. With that, he stands up and prepares to record his new skill. While the system records the movements, Choi chooses to start with his kick, performing the motion for the recording. Once it's finished, the system will generate the alteration, optimizing his physical balance and mana control. Choi simply watches as the system operates, and suddenly, a warning message catches him by surprise, while he thinks that his life is finally becoming a real Isekai story. The system's warning message comes with a failure during the creation process and a suggestion for Choi to perform the movement correctly. Choi then gets irritated, asking what the hell is going on, since he did exactly what the system asked him to do, not knowing why the hell it's not working. Rachel speculates that the system might not be recognizing Choi because he's a bug user, since he possesses demonic chi, clarifying that the hero's security system is the most secure in that world. Therefore, it's not Choi's fault that he wasn't able to use the skill the way he did. Choi, even more annoyed, grabs Rachel with his hands and shakes her violently up and down, leaving her desperate. While he explains that he's already pissed and her explanation made it worse, something catches his attention. A new hero quest has appeared, and even before reading it, Choi gets even more irritated by a new mission, having spent a bunch of points for nothing, demanding that the system return his points. In the mission, it informs that it's too early for him to despair over the points spent, stating that he can always earn more points and now it's time to forget the past and move on. The mission is precisely to create a new skill using his strength. Sometime later at Riedrun's training field, Choi begs his master once again on his knees to help him. Riedrun confirms Choi's request, saying that he needs help to develop his personalized wrath, and Choi confirms it. Riedrun takes a moment to analyze, then responds to Choi saying he'll help him. Choi, with teary eyes, is left speechless by the answer, and Riedrun adds that he was already planning on giving Choi some training anyway. Riedrun turns and informs that the training has just begun, and Choi promptly follows him. Moments later, the two are sitting in a moment of concentration, marking the beginning of that training. The session continues with more strikes and some physical exercises, which may be the ones that leave Choi quite exhausted. At the end, Riedrun and the saint observe Choi resting in his room again, with some bandages and his feet positioned in a bizarre way. Marking day 1, Choi smiles, grateful for having completed the day, and after getting up to pull himself together, he checks the system window informing that he completed a mission. Choi's combat power increases, and he then reflects on having managed to create his personalized wrath. It's a modified version of Riedrun's martial arts style, and the name Choi gives to this new style will be Nobilis. On the day of the tournament, the host greets everyone, introducing himself as Jark, explaining that this time's event will be to select 1 company commander and 13 battalion commanders. The host also states that the number of expected tournament participants exceeds 1,000. Focusing on the image of Remus and Hyuna, who are together in a room, the host explains that the tournament will consist of 3 matches in total and that all of them will follow a battle style different from the usual in previous tournaments. All participants will have 1 hour to prepare for the beginning of the first match, and during that we already see some participants gathered, including one with a goat head and a weird smile. Right after that, we see Choi smiling as the host explains that a knife has been accidentally dropped, making a metaphor with the name of the first match, which is the Killer Run and will take place on the Outlaw of the Highway.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps. And for more content like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see another part. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time. Bye-bye.